In the shadowed halls of Harrow Manor, a whisper in the night unveils a deadly secret. The cursed Harrow sapphire, a jewel lost to time, is about to resurface. Why is a disgraced cousin lurking in the shadows? Who fired the shot that shattered the silence? And what dark force pulls the strings of a conspiracy, threatening to destroy a family's legacy? Join Hercule Poirot as he unravels a web of betrayal, greed, and hidden truths in a race against time where every clue raises more questions than answers. Chapter 1. The Whisper in the Drawing Room. The late autumn sun cast a golden haze over the rolling hills of Somerset, where the sprawling estate of Harrow Manor stood like a sentinel of a bygone era. Its ivy-clad towers and mullioned windows gleamed with an air of faded grandeur, as if the house itself were reluctant to relinquish its secrets to the modern age. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his tailored suit and polished shoes, stepped from the chauffeured car onto the gravel drive, his mustache twitching slightly as he surveyed the scene. The air was crisp, scented with damp earth and the faint tank of wood smoke. And Poirot's sharp eyes missed nothing, not the nervous twitch of the butler's hands as he opened the door, nor the distant bark of a hound echoing from the woods beyond. Bean, Poirot murmured to himself, adjusting his Homburg hat, a setting most picturesque, but one that conceals, perhaps, a turbulence beneath its calm. He had been summoned by Lady Evelyn Harrow, the widowed matriarch of the Harrow family, whose urgent letter had reached him in London only 2 days prior. The missive, written in a trembling hand, spoke of a delicate matter threatening the family's unrest, matter requiring the discretion and acumen of the great Hercule Poirot. The invitation to a weekend at Harrow Manor, ostensibly for a social gathering, was a thinly veiled pretext. Poirot, ever intrigued by the complexities of human nature, had accepted without hesitation. The butler, a stooped man with a face like weathered parchment, led Poirot through a cavernous hall adorned with ancestral portraits. Their eyes seemed to follow him, each gaze heavy with the weight of centuries. The air inside was cool, tinged with the musty scent of old books and polished oak. Poirot's polished shoes clicked rhythmically on the parquet floor as he was ushered into the drawing room, where a fire crackled in a massive hearth, casting flickering shadows across the damask wallpaper. Lady Evelyn Harrow stood by a tall window, her silhouette framed against the fading light. She was a woman of perhaps 60, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her posture rigid yet regal in a gown of deep emerald. Her eyes, however, betrayed a flicker of unease as she turned to greet her guest. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low and cultured, "you honor us with your presence. I trust your journey was pleasant." "Most pleasant," Lady Harrow, Poirot replied, bowing slightly. "The English countryside, it has a charm that soothes the soul. Nest see, pa. But I sense that it is not the beauty of your estate that brings me here." Her lips tightened, and she gestured to a plush armchair. "Please, sit. You are as perceptive as your reputation suggests." As Poirot settled into the chair, his gaze swept the room. A dozen or so guests mingled their voices, a soft hum beneath the clink of crystal glasses. There was Sir Reginald Voss, a portly financier with a booming laugh that masked a calculating glint in his eye. Miss Clara Harrow, Lady Evelyn's sharp-tongued niece, whose crimson dress seemed a deliberate challenge to the room's decorum, and Dr. Alistair Gray, a local physician whose nervous fidgeting with his watch chain suggested he was out of his depth among such company. Poirot's eyes lingered on a young footman, Thomas, who moved with a quiet efficiency, his face pale and his hands trembling as he poured sherry for a guest. "You are correct, Monsieur Poirot," Lady Evelyn continued, lowering her voice as she took a seat opposite him. "I have called you here under the guise of a social weekend, but there is a matter, a delicate matter, as I wrote. I fear a scandal that could ruin the Harrow name." Poirot leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "A scandal? Madame, of what nature?" She hesitated, her gaze darting toward the guests. "It concerns the Harrow sapphire, a family heirloom of immense value. It has been missing for decades, hidden by my late husband to protect it from unsavory interests. Recently, I have heard rumors, that someone seeks to claim it, perhaps by illicit means. Whispers, you say? Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. And from whom do these whispers originate? Before Lady Evelyn could respond, a burst of laughter from Sir Reginald interrupted them. The room's attention shifted to the financier, who was regaling a small group with a tale of his latest venture in the city. Poirot, however, remained focused on his hostess, noting the faint flush of frustration on her cheeks. I cannot say for certain, she admitted. The servants, perhaps, or one of the guests. But the rumors are persistent, and I fear they are not idle gossip. The sapphire is more than a jewel. It is a symbol of our family's legacy. Its loss would be catastrophic. Poirot nodded, his mind already turning over the possibilities. And this sapphire, it is hidden within the manor. So my husband believed, Lady Evelyn said. He spoke of a secret place, known only to him, but he died before revealing its location. I have searched, but to no avail. The conversation was cut short by the announcement of dinner. The guests moved toward the dining room, a grand space adorned with a chandelier that sparkled like a constellation above a long mahogany table. Poirot took his place near Lady Evelyn, his keen eyes observing the dynamics of the gathering. The meal was a sumptuous affair-roast pheasant, glazed vegetables, and a claret that Poirot deemed acceptable, but not exceptional. Yet his attention was not on the food, but on the undercurrents of tension rippling through the room. Miss Clara Harrow, seated across from Poirot, leaned forward with a sly smile. Monsieur Poirot, do tell us, have you ever solved a case that stumped even your famous little gray cells? Poirot's mustache twitched with amusement. Mademoiselle, the little gray cells, they are never truly stumped. They merely pause to consider the complexities of human folly. Her laugh was sharp, almost mocking. Oh, I do hope you find some folly here to entertain you. Harrow Manor is dreadfully dull otherwise. Dull. Poirot's tone was mild, but his eyes were sharp. I find that places such as this, they are rarely dull when one looks beneath the surface. As the meal progressed, Poirot's attention was drawn to the footman, Thomas, who moved silently among the guests, refilling glasses with a precision that bordered on mechanical. Yet there was something in his demeanor, slight hesitation, a glance too long at Lady Evelyn, that piqued Poirot's curiosity. The young man's hands, Poirot noted, trembled as he poured wine for Sir Reginald, nearly spilling it. It was during the dessert course, a delicate lemon soufflé, that Poirot's ears caught a fragment of conversation, not meant for him. Thomas, standing near a sideboard, was speaking in a hushed tone to another servant, a maid with a pinched face and darting eyes. The words were faint, but Poirot's acute hearing discerned them. The sapphire, he knows where it is. We must act tonight. Poirot's pulse quickened, though his expression remained impassive. He sipped his coffee, his mind racing. Who was he, and what action was planned for tonight? The whisper was a thread, delicate but significant, in the tapestry of intrigue Lady Evelyn had described. The dinner concluded with a toast to the Harrow family's continued prosperity, though noted the strained smiles of several guests. As the party dispersed to the drawing room for brandy and cigars, Poirot lingered, his gaze fixed on Thomas. The footman was clearing plates, his movements swift but betraying a nervous energy. Poirot approached him, his demeanor casual but his intent razor-sharp. "Pardon, Jen, Aom," Poirot said, his voice soft but commanding. "You are Thomas Wheat." The footman froze, a stack of plates wobbling in his hands. "Why, yes, sir," he stammered, his eyes wide. "Can I help you?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, his smile disarming. "I could not help but notice your dedication to your duties. You have been with the Harrow family long." "Only a year, sir," Thomas replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just a footman, sir, nothing more." "Bean, sir," Poirot said, his tone soothing. "But a footman, he sees much, does he not? The comings and goings, the secrets of a great house." Thomas's face paled further, and he glanced toward the door, as if longing to escape. "I don't know what you mean, sir." Poirot leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "Come, Thomas, you are young, perhaps caught in something larger than yourself. Tell me what you know of the sapphire, and I shall ensure no harm comes to you." The footman's eyes darted to the side, and for a moment Poirot thought he might bolt, but then, with a shudder, Thomas whispered, "It's not my place, sir. I only heard him talking. Mr. Crane, sir, he's back, and he knows where the sapphire is, he said. He said tonight's the night." Mr. Crane. Poirot's eyebrows rose. "And who is this Mr. Crane?" Thomas swallowed hard. "Victor Crane, sir. Lady Evelyn's cousin. He was cast out years ago, but he's back. I heard him in the village, talking to someone. I don't know who. Please, sir, don't tell anyone I said anything." Poirot placed a reassuring hand on the young man's shoulder. "You have done well, Thomas. Your secret is safe with Hercule Poirot. Now, go about your duties, and say nothing of this." As Thomas hurried away, Poirot's mind whirred with possibilities. Victor Crane, a disgraced cousin, banished yet now returned. The sapphire, a jewel of legend, hidden yet sought after. And a whisper, overheard in the flickering light of a drawing room, pointing to a plot that would unfold under the cover of night. The evening drew to a close, the guests retiring to their rooms. Poirot, however, remained in the drawing room, seated by the dying fire, his notebook open on his lap. He sketched a diagram of the manor's layout, marking the dining room, the sideboard where Thomas had whispered, and the likely paths to the servants' quarters. The little gray cells, as he called them, were at work, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that was only beginning to take shape. A soft creak from the hallway snapped him from his reverie. He rose, silent as a cat, and peered into the corridor. A figure moved in the shadows, too distant to identify, but the purposeful stride suggested intent. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. The game, it seemed, had begun. He returned to his chair, his pen poised above the notebook. The night was young, and Harrow Manor was alive with secrets. The whisper in the drawing room had set the stage, and Poirot was determined to unravel the truth before the curtain fell. For now, he had a name, Victor Crane, and a plan: to watch, to listen, and to let the little gray cells guide him to the heart of the mystery. The chapter closed with Poirot's resolve firm. The mystery of the Harrow sapphire taking root in his mind. The night held promise of danger, but also of revelation, and Hercule Poirot was ready to meet it head. Chapter 2. The footman's secret. The air in Harrow Manor was thick with the scent of beeswax polish and old roses, a perfume that clung to the heavy draperies and seeped into the very walls of the grand estate. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his tailored suit, his mustache a pristine arc of ebony, stood in the morning room, his sharp eyes taking in every detail. The previous evening's dinner had left an impression, not for its sumptuous roast pheasant or the claret that gleamed like rubies in the candlelight, but for a single, fleeting moment, a whisper, barely audible, that had drifted to his ears as he lingered near the drawing-room door, a whisper that spoke of secrets and a fortune tied to the Harrow sapphire, a jewel said to be both a blessing and a curse. Lady Evelyn Harrow, the matriarch of the sprawling estate, had summoned Poirot with a letter that hinted at scandal but offered no specifics. Her face, pale and drawn beneath its powder, betrayed a woman who feared more than she admitted. The dinner had been a parade of strained smiles and guarded glances, the guests a mix of family, distant cousins, and hangers-on, each seeming to carry their own burdens. But it was the footman, Thomas, who had caught Poirot's attention, a young man with nervous hands and eyes that darted like a cornered hare. He had lingered too long near the door, his ear tilted toward a hushed conversation. When Poirot's gaze met his, Thomas had flinched, spilling a drop of wine from the decanter he carried. Now, in the pale light of morning, Poirot stood before a tall window, the frost on the glass tracing delicate patterns that mirrored the intricacy of the case unfolding before him. The manor was quiet, save for the distant clatter of breakfast preparations. Hastings, ever the loyal companion, entered the room, his tweed jacket slightly rumpled from the early hour. "Good morning, Poirot," Hastings said, stifling a yawn. "You look as though you've already solved the mystery in your sleep." Poirot turned, his expression one of mild reproach. "Mon ami, the little gray cells do not sleep. They ponder, they reflect, they arrange the facts like pieces of a mosaic. Last night, I heard something a whisper that suggests a secret most intriguing, and the footman, Thomas, he knows more than he lets on." Hastings raised an eyebrow. "The footman, he seemed a bit jumpy, I'll grant you, but aren't all servants a tad nervous around guests? Not like this, Hastings. The eyes, they betray the heart. Thomas is afraid, and fear, it is the key to many a locked door. Come, we shall speak with him." They found Thomas in the servants' hall, polishing silver with a fervor that suggested he wished to scrub away more than tarnish. The room was a stark contrast to the opulent drawing rooms above plain wooden benches. A single iron stove, and a lingering smell of damp wool from the servants' coats drying nearby. Thomas looked up as Poirot and Hastings entered, his hands freezing mid-motion, the cloth clutched tightly in his fingers. "Monsieur Thomas," Poirot began, his voice smooth as velvet, "I wish only a moment of your time. You will not be in trouble, I assure you. But last night, at the dinner, I observed you. You heard something, did you not? Something that caused you great unease." Thomas's face paled, his knuckles whitening around the polishing cloth. I don't know what you mean, sir. I was just doing my duties." Poirot's eyes gleamed with that quiet intensity that made lesser men squirm. "Come now, mon jeune ami. The truth, it is a burden only until it is shared. What did you hear by the drawing-room door?" The footman glanced toward the door, as if expecting someone to burst in. His voice dropped to a whisper. "It wasn't right, sir. I shouldn't have listened, but I couldn't help it. They were talking about the Harrow sapphire. Said it was hidden somewhere in the manor, and they meant to take it." That Poirot's voice was sharp, like a blade slicing through fog. "Who, precisely?" Thomas hesitated, his gaze flickering to Hastings, then back to Poirot. "I only caught one name, sir. Victor Crane. He's a cousin of Lady Evelyn's, but they don't speak of him. Disgraced, they say. Cast out years ago." Poirot nodded, his mind already turning over this new piece of the puzzle. Victor Crane, a name that carried weight, a shadow cast long across the Harrow family. And what did they say of this Victor Crane? "They said he's back, sir. That he's planning something. Something about the sapphire being cursed, and him wanting it for himself. I didn't hear more. They stopped when they saw me nearby. I swear, I didn't mean to eavesdrop." Poirot raised a hand, his gesture calming. "You have done well to tell me, Thomas. But tell me, why does this knowledge make you so afraid?" Thomas swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because, sir, I heard them say anyone who gets in their way, they'd make sure they regretted it. I've got a sister, sir, working in the village. If they think I know too much." His voice trailed off, his eyes wide with fear. Poirot placed a reassuring hand on the young man's shoulder. "Fear not, Thomas. You have my word. No harm will come to you or your sister. But you must trust Hercule Poirot. If you hear anything more, you will come to me." Thomas nodded, relief flickering across his face. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." As they left the servants' hall, Hastings glanced at Poirot. "Well, that's a start. Victor Crane sounds like a bad egg, but who was he talking to? And what's this about a cursed sapphire?" Poirot's lips curved into a small, enigmatic smile. "Patience, Hastings. The sapphire, it is the heart of this mystery. But the heart, it is often surrounded by shadows. We must find this Victor Crane, and we must learn who his ally is within these walls. For now, we have a name, and that is a thread to follow." The morning passed in a flurry of discreet inquiries. Poirot, with his characteristic blend of charm and persistence, spoke to the butler, Mr. Grayson, a man whose stiff demeanor hid a wealth of knowledge about the manor's history. Grayson confirmed Victor Crane's existence, a cousin who had fallen into ruin through gambling and deceit, banished from the family a decade ago after a scandal involving forged bonds. The Harrow sapphire, Grayson noted with a frown, was a jewel of immense value, said to have been brought back from India by Lady Evelyn's great-grandfather. Rumors of a curse clung to it, tied to mysterious deaths and misfortunes that plagued the Harrow family over generations. It is said, Grayson intoned, his voice low, that the sapphire brings ruin to those who seek to possess it for greed. Lady Evelyn's father died shortly after attempting to sell it, and her brother vanished under strange circumstances. The jewel has not been seen in years, locked away somewhere in the manor. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And this Victor Crane, he believes he can claim it. Grayson hesitated. He was always reckless. Sir, if he's returned, it's not for love or family. The day wore on, and Poirot's mind churned with possibilities. The manor itself seemed to hum with secrets, its corridors lined with portraits, whose eyes followed him, their painted gazes heavy with judgment. He and Hastings took tea in the conservatory, a glass-walled haven filled with exotic plants, their leaves brushing against the panes like whispered secrets. Poirot sipped his tisane, his thoughts elsewhere. Hastings, he said suddenly, consider the nature of a curse. It is not the jewel itself that brings ruin, but the desires it awakens in men. This, Victor Crane, he is driven by something revenge, perhaps, or desperation, but he does not act alone. The whisper Thomas heard it was a conversation. Someone within this household is his confederate. Hastings set down his cup. But who? Lady Evelyn, one of the cousins. That pompous fellow, Sir Reginald, who kept boasting about his horses last night. Poirot chuckled softly. Sir Reginald, he is too fond of his own voice to keep a secret. No, we must look for someone quieter, someone who watches more than they speak. And we must be vigilant, for if Crane is planning a theft, he will not wait long. As if in answer to Poirot's words, the manor was plunged into darkness. A sudden, jarring blackout extinguished every light, leaving the conservatory bathed only in the faint glow of the moon filtering through the glass. Hastings leaped to his feet, his hand instinctively reaching for a non-existent revolver. Good Lord, Poirot, what's happened? Poirot remained seated, his silhouette calm against the moonlight. A blackout, Hastings. But not, I think, an accident. Come, we must see to the safety of the household. They navigated the darkened corridors, guided by the faint flicker of a candle Poirot had retrieved from a nearby table. The manor was alive with movement, servants rushing to light lamps, guests murmuring in confusion. Lady Evelyn appeared at the top of the grand staircase, her silk shawl clutched tightly around her shoulders. Monsieur Poirot, she called, her voice trembling. What is the meaning of this? The lights have never failed before. Poirot bowed slightly, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos. Madame, I suspect this is no mere fault of wiring. Someone wishes to create confusion, perhaps to mask their actions. Tell me, where is the electrical box for the manor? Lady Evelyn hesitated, then gestured toward the servants' wing. In the basement, near the old coal chute. But surely you don't think, I think, madame, that we must act swiftly. Hastings, come. The basement was a labyrinth of damp stone and cobwebs, the air heavy with the scent of earth and mildew. The electrical box, an ancient contraption of levers and fuses, stood in a shadowed corner. Poirot examined it closely, his gloved fingers tracing the wires. A single fuse had been deliberately removed, its slot empty. Sabotage, Poirot murmured. Someone wished to plunge the manor into darkness. But why? To distract us, perhaps, or to move unseen. Hastings frowned. Crane, perhaps, or his ally. We must restore the lights. And then Poirot paused, his head tilting as a faint sound reached his ears. A soft scrape, like a footstep on stone, echoed from the far end of the basement. Without a word, Poirot motioned for Hastings to follow. They moved silently, their candle casting long shadows that danced on the walls. The sound grew louder, muffled thump, followed by a faint rustle. Poirot rounded a corner and froze. There, in the dim light, stood a figure, half hidden behind a stack of crates. The figure turned, and for a moment Poirot caught a glimpse of a face, sharp features, a scar above one eyebrow. Then the figure bolted, disappearing into the maze of the basement. "After him," Hastings cried, but Poirot held up a hand. "No, Hastings, he is gone, and we are not equipped for a chase in such a place. But we have seen him, and that is enough for now. The scar is distinctive. We will find him again." They returned to the electrical box, where Poirot deftly replaced a fuse, restoring light to the manor. As they ascended to the main house, the household was abuzz with relief. But Poirot's mind was elsewhere. The figure in the basement, the whisper about the sapphire, the name Victor Cranit, all pointed to a plot that was moving faster than he had anticipated. Back in the morning room, Poirot sat, his hands folded neatly in his lap. "Hastings," he said, "we have made progress. Thomas has given us a name, and the blackout has shown us that our adversary is bold. But we must be bolder still. Victor Crane is here, or near, and he has an ally within these walls. We must watch, we must listen, and we must use the little gray cells to uncover the truth before the sapphire is lost or worse." The chapter closed with Poirot's gaze fixed on the frost-covered window, the patterns now melting in the warmth of the restored lights. The manor was bright again, but the shadows of the mystery remained, deeper and more dangerous than ever. Chapter 3. Shadows in the library. The air in Harrow Manor's library hung heavy with the scent of old leather and polished wood, a sanctuary of knowledge that seemed to whisper secrets in every creak of its ancient floorboards. Hercule Poirot stood at the threshold, his keen eyes scanning the vast room. Tall shelves stretched toward a vaulted ceiling, their dark mahogany surfaces gleaming faintly in the light of a single chandelier. The dinner had ended an hour ago, and the guests had dispersed, their laughter and clinking glasses fading into the night. Yet the cryptic whisper Poirot had overheard, "The sapphire lies where shadows fall," lingered in his mind, a riddle that demanded his attention. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion, hovered at Poirot's side, his brow furrowed with curiosity. "I say, Poirot, this place is a veritable labyrinth of books. Where do we even begin? That whisper you mentioned, could it have been a servant's gossip? Nothing more?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of amusement. "Mon ami, gossip is the bread and butter of many a household, but a whisper so precise, so laden with intent. Nan, it is a breadcrumb, and Poirot shall follow it to the loaf." He stepped forward, his polished shoes silent on the thick Persian rug. The library, Hastings, is not merely a room. It is a stage where secrets play their parts. We must find the prop that conceals the truth. The library was indeed a marvel, its shelves packed with volumes ranging from dusty tomes of medieval history to modern novels bound in bright cloth. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, its hearth cold but adorned with intricate carvings of vines and mythical beasts. Above it, a portrait of the late Lord Harrow gazed down, his stern eyes seeming to follow their every move. Poirot's gaze lingered on the portrait momentarily before shifting to a large oak desk near the center of the room, its surface cluttered with papers, an inkstand, and a curious brass paperweight shaped like a lion's head. "Hastings," Poirot said, his voice low but commanding, "examine the shelves on the left. Look for anything out of place. A book that does not belong, a mark that betrays a hidden hand." "I shall attend to this desk." Hastings nodded, though his expression betrayed a touch of skepticism. "Righto, Poirot, but if you ask me, this is a needle in a haystack. A library this size could hide a dozen secrets." "Precisement," Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. "And that is why we must be methodical. The little gray cells, they do not falter in the face of chaos." As Hastings began his search, running his fingers along the spines of leather-bound volumes, Poirot approached the desk. His movements were deliberate, almost theatrical, as if he were performing for an invisible audience. He lifted the lion's head paperweight, testing its weight, then set it aside. The papers on the desk were mundane at first glance, letters of condolence for Lord Harrow's passing, estate accounts, a half-finished draft of Lady Evelyn's speech for a local charity. But Poirot's fingers paused over a small, yellowed envelope tucked beneath a ledger. It was unsealed, its edges frayed, and it bore no address. Only a single word in elegant script. Haro, Curio, Poirot murmured, opening the envelope with care. Inside was a single sheet of parchment, its ink faded but legible. The text was a series of numbers and letters, arranged in a grid. 3B7, A12, L9, F4, C8, T1, A6, M15, P below the grid. A single line read, "Where shadows fall, the truth is locked." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind already racing. A code, Hastings. A puzzle, most ingenious. "This is no mere letter, it is a map to our sapphire." Hastings, who had been half-heartedly inspecting a shelf of botanical journals, turned sharply. "A code. Good heavens, Poirot, you've found something already. Not merely something mon ami. The key to our mystery, perhaps." Poirot held up the parchment, his expression one of quiet triumph. "But we must decipher it. The numbers, the letters, they point to something within this room, or perhaps beyond it." Hastings crossed the room, peering over Poirot's shoulder. "At the cryptic text, looks like gibberish to me. Could it be a reference to books, page numbers, maybe?" Poirot tilted his head, considering. "Possible, but too simple for such a secret. No, this is a cipher of precision. The letters B, R, L, F, C, T, A, M, P, they may correspond to positions, objects, or even directions. And the phrase, 'Where shadows fall,' it is the same as the whisper. This is no coincidence." He turned his attention back to the desk, running his fingers along its edges. The wood was smooth, but at one corner, his touch detected a faint irregularity, a seam where none should be. With a gentle press, a soft click echoed in the quiet library, and a small panel slid open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a brass key, its head engraved with a sapphire blue gem. "Mon Dieu!" exclaimed, holding the key aloft. "The desk, it yields its secrets. This key, Hastings, it is a step closer to our prize." Hastings gaped, his skepticism giving way to awe. "How on earth did you know to look there?" Poirot tapped his temple. "The little gray cells, they observe what others overlook. The desk is the heart of this room, and hearts, they often conceal what matters most." But before Poirot could examine the key further, a faint rustle came from the far end of the library, near a tall window, draped in heavy velvet curtains. The sound was slight, like the brush of fabric against fabric, but in the stillness, it was unmistakable. Poirot froze, his hand tightening around the key. "Hastings," he whispered, "we are not alone." Hastings, ever the man of action, reached for the poker by the fireplace, his eyes darting to the shadows. "Who's there?" he called, his voice steady but laced with tension. "Show yourself." Silence answered, but the curtains twitched, betraying movement. Poirot gestured for Hastings to stay back, then moved toward the window with the grace of a cat stalking its prey. He paused, listening, then yanked the curtains aside in a swift motion. A figure stumbled backward, caught off guard, a young woman in a maid's uniform, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. In her hand, she clutched a small notebook, its pages fluttering as she clutched it to her chest. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said, his tone sharp but not unkind, "explain yourself. Why do you lurk in the shadows of this library?" The maid, whose name tag read Elsie, stammered. I wasn't spying, sir. I was cleaning, yes, cleaning the windowsills." Poirot's mustache twitched again, this time with skepticism. "At this hour, in the dark, with a notebook? Non, mademoiselle, that will not do. Speak the truth, or Poirot shall be most displeased." Elsie's shoulders slumped, and she lowered her gaze. I was looking for something. A letter, like the one you found. I heard about it from Thomas, the footman. He said it was important, that it might save the family." "Save the family," Hastings interjected, lowering the poker, but keeping it at the ready. "From what?" Elsie hesitated, then whispered, "From ruin. There's talk below stairs about debts, about the sapphire being the only thing that can pay them off. I thought, if I found the letter, I could help." Poirot studied her, his piercing gaze softening slightly. Your intentions, they may be noble, but your methods, they are suspect. This notebook, what does it contain? Reluctantly, Elsie handed it over. Poirot flipped through its pages, finding sketches of the manor's layout, notes on the family's routines, and, most intriguingly, a partial copy of the same code from the parchment. The numbers were incomplete, but the phrase "where shadows fall" was underlined twice. You have been busy, Mademoiselle Poirot said, closing the notebook. But you are not the author of this code, are you? Elsie shook her head. No, sir. I found it in the servants' quarters, tucked in an old book. I thought it might lead to the sapphire. Poirot nodded, his mind already piecing together the puzzle. Very well. You shall return to your duties, but you will speak of this to no one. Poirot has your confidence. Yes, sir, Elsie said, her voice trembling but relieved. She curtsied and slipped out of the library, leaving Poirot and Hastings alone once more. Well, that was unexpected, Hastings said, setting the poker down. Do you believe her, Poirot? I believe she speaks part of the truth, Poirot replied, tucking the notebook into his pocket. But there is more to this than a maid's curiosity. The code, the key, the whisper, they are threads in a tapestry, and we must weave them together. He returned to the desk, placing the parchment and key side by side. The code, Hastings. Let us decipher it. The numbers and letters, they suggest a sequence, perhaps a location within this library. The shelves are marked with letters and numbers, are they not? Hastings nodded, pointing to the nearest shelf, where brass plaques labeled sections, A1, A2, B1, B2, and so on. You think the code points to specific shelves? Precisement, Poirot said. Let us test the theory. The first line, 3B7, R12L. We begin with shelf 3B. They move to the shelf labeled 3B, a section filled with histories of the British Empire. Poirot scanned the titles, his fingers brushing the spines, until he paused at a volume titled The Glories of Albion. Its spine was slightly misaligned, protruding just enough to catch his eye. He pulled it out, revealing a small hollow carved into the shelf behind it. Inside was a folded map, its edges brittle but intact. Mon ami, Poirot exclaimed, unfolding the map with care. It depicted the manor's grounds, with a red X marked near the old chapel. Below the X, in the same elegant script as the envelope, were the words, "The Sapphire's resting place." Hastings let out a low whistle. Good Lord, Poirot, you've done it. This must be where the sapphire is hidden. Not so fast, Hastings, Poirot cautioned. This map, it is a clue, not the solution. The sapphire is not so easily won. And yet, we have made progress. The code has led us here, and the key. He held up the brass key, its sapphire gem glinting in the chandelier's light. It will unlock the next step. As they studied the map, a shadow flickered across the library's far wall, cast by the chandelier's swaying crystals. Poirot's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. Hastings, did you see that? See what? Hastings asked, following Poirot's gaze. The room's empty, isn't it? Perhaps, Poirot said, his voice barely above a whisper. But shadows, they do not move without cause. Someone watches us, mon ami, someone who knows we are close. He moved to the window, peering into the darkness beyond. The grounds were still bathed in moonlight, but a faint glint caught his azure reflection, perhaps from a spyglass or a blade. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving only the rustle of leaves in the night breeze. Come, Hastings, Poirot said, folding the map and slipping it into his pocket alongside the key and notebook. We have what we came for, but the game, it grows more dangerous. We must be vigilant. As they left the library, the portrait of Lord Harrow seemed to watch them go, its eyes gleaming with secrets yet untold. The chapter closed with Poirot's mind alight with possibilities, the map a tangible triumph, but the shadow's presence a reminder that the mystery was far from solved. Chapter 4. The Stranger at the Gate. The English countryside stretched before the Harrow estate like a velvet quilt, its rolling hills bathed in the soft glow of dawn. Hercule Poirot stood at the window of the manor's morning room, his impeccable silhouette framed against the rose-tinted sky. His neatly trimmed mustache twitched slightly as he sipped his tisane, his sharp gray eyes scanning the gravel drive that wound toward the estate's wrought-iron gates. The events of the previous night, the coded letter, the hidden compartment, the shadow in the corridor, had set his mind alight with possibilities. The Harrow sapphire, that elusive jewel said to carry a curse, was at the heart of a mystery that grew more intricate by the hour. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful companion, entered the room, his face a mixture of eagerness and concern. "Poirot, you've been up since before the roosters. What's got you so pensive?" "That letter we found last night." Poirot turned, his expression serene yet piercing. "The letter, mon ami, is but a single thread in a tapestry most complex. It points to the sapphire, yes, but also to a person, Victor Crane, the disgraced cousin of Lady Evelyn. And yet, I suspect there is more to this than a simple theft. The air, it is heavy with secrets." Before Hastings could reply, a sharp rap echoed from the front hall, followed by the butler's measured footsteps. Poirot raised an eyebrow, setting his cup down with deliberate care. A visitor, at this hour. Most curious. The butler, a stoic man named Grayson, appeared at the door. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, a gentleman, has arrived. He claims to be a private investigator and insists on speaking with you regarding a matter of urgency." "He is waiting at the gate." "A private investigator," Hastings said, his brow furrowing. "Bit early for a professional call, don't you think?" Poirot's lips curled into a faint smile. "The hour, Hastings, is irrelevant when the motive is pressing. Let us meet this gentleman. Perhaps he brings a piece of our puzzle." The two men followed Grayson through the manor's grand foyer, its walls adorned with portraits of stern-faced heroes, staring down as if guarding their secrets. Outside, the morning mist clung to the ground, lending an ethereal quality to the scene. At the gate stood a tall man in a weathered trench coat, his hat pulled low over his eyes. He carried a leather satchel, and his posture was rigid, as though braced for confrontation. The gatekeeper, an elderly man with a face like crumpled parchment, stood nearby, eyeing the stranger warily. "Bonjour," Poirot greeted, his voice smooth but laced with authority. "I am Hercule Poirot, and this is my associate, Captain Hastings. You have requested an audience. Monsieur, may I have your name and your purpose?" The stranger tipped his hat slightly, revealing sharp blue eyes and a jaw set with determination. "Name's Richard Malloy, private investigator. I've been hired to track down Victor Crane. Word is he's been seen near this estate, and I've reason to believe he's after something valuable, something belonging to the Harrow family." Poirot's eyes narrowed, though his expression remained polite. "A most interesting claim, Monsieur Malloy. And who, may I ask, has engaged your services?" Malloy hesitated, his fingers tightening on the satchel. "A client who prefers anonymity. Let's just say they've got a stake in keeping Crane away from here. I've got papers, credentials if you need him." "Credentials? We would be most appreciated," Poirot said, extending a hand. Malloy produced a folded document from his satchel, which Poirot examined with meticulous care. The paper bore the letterhead of a London-based investigative firm, complete with a seal and signature. Yet something in Poirot's gaze suggested he was not entirely convinced. "Tell me, Monsieur Malloy," Poirot continued, handing the document back, "what do you know of this Victor Crane, and why do you believe he is here?" Malloy shifted, his weight glancing toward the manor as if expecting someone to emerge. "Crane's a bad sort, disinherited by the Harrows. Years ago, after some scandal embezzlement, they say. He's been in and out of trouble ever since. My client got wind. He's planning to steal a family heirloom, a sapphire. I'm here to stop him." Hastings, who had been listening intently, interjected. "A sapphire, you say? That's awfully specific for someone claiming to work for an anonymous client. How'd you come by that detail?" Malloy's eyes flicked to Hastings, a flash of irritation crossing his face before he masked it with a tight smile. "I've got my sources. People talk, especially in the underbelly of London. Crane's been boasting about a big score, and the Harrow sapphires, the talk of certain circles. Poirot tilted his head, his fingers steepled before him. Most intriguing, monsieur. And yet, you arrive at the precise moment when the household is already on edge. A coincidence, perhaps, or something more. Malloy bristled. I'm not here to cause trouble, Mr. Poirot. I'm here to prevent it. If Crane's skulking about, I can help you catch him. Very well, Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. You may accompany us to the manor, where we shall discuss this further. But first, I must insist you allow Grayson to search your satchel, a precaution, you understand. Malloy's jaw tightened, but he handed over the satchel without protest. Grayson rifled through it, finding only a notebook, a fountain pen, and a small photograph of a man Poirot presumed to be Victor Crane, dark-haired, with a lean face and a scar above his left eyebrow. Satisfied, Grayson returned the satchel, and the group made their way back to the manor. Inside, Poirot led Malloy to the drawing room, where a fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Lady Evelyn Harrow, elegant in a silk morning gown, joined them, her expression a mix of curiosity and unease. Monsieur Poirot, who is this gentleman? She asked, her voice betraying a hint of strain. Madame, this is Monsieur Richard Malloy, a private investigator who claims to seek Victor Crane. Poirot replied, watching her closely. He believes your cousin is nearby, intent on stealing the Harrow sapphire. Lady Evelyn's hand flew to her throat, her eyes widening. Victor here. But that's impossible. He was banished years ago. He wouldn't dare return. And yet, Poirot said, the evidence suggests otherwise. Monsieur Malloy, perhaps you could share more of what you know. For instance, how did you learn of Crane's plans so precisely? Malloy leaned back in his chair, his demeanor casual, but his eyes sharp. Like I said, I've got sources. A barkeep in London overheard Crane talking to some rough types. Said he was planning to sneak into the estate during a big event, maybe a dinner or a ball. He's got someone on the inside, too, feeding him information. Someone on the inside. Hastings echoed, his voice sharp. That's a serious accusation. Any names? Malloy shrugged. Not yet, but I'd wager it's someone close to the family. Crane's not the sort to work alone. Lady Evelyn paled, her fingers twisting the fabric of her gown. This is dreadful. Monsieur Poirot, what do we do? Poirot raised a hand, his expression calm but commanding. Madame, there is no need for alarm. The little gray cells, they are already at work. Monsieur Malloy, you will forgive me if I find your story incomplete. A private investigator, hired by an anonymous client, arriving without announcement, knowing details that are suspiciously precise. Nan, this does not sit well with Hercule Poirot. Malloy's smile faltered, and for a moment, his composure slipped. I'm not sure I like what you're implying, Mr. Poirot. I imply nothing, Poirot said smoothly. I observe, and what I observe is a man whose credentials, while impressive, lack the weight of authenticity. Tell me, Monsieur Malloy, what is the name of the barkeep who overheard this conversation about Victor Crane? Malloy hesitated, his fingers drumming on the armrest. I don't recall exactly. It was a tip passed through my network. And this network, Poirot pressed, it operates with such precision that you arrive at the Harrow estate mere hours after a coded letter is discovered, pointing to the very same sapphire you claim to protect. A coincidence, perhaps, but Hercule Poirot does not believe in coincidences. The room fell silent, the crackle of the fire the only sound. Lady Evelyn glanced between Poirot and Malloy, her unease growing. Hastings, sensing the tension, shifted closer to Poirot, ready to act if needed. Malloy's eyes darted to the door, then back to Poirot. You're a clever one, aren't you? Fine, I'll level with you. My client's not entirely anonymous. It's someone connected to the Harrows, someone who wants to keep the family's name out of the mud. They hired me to make sure Crane doesn't get his hands on that sapphire. Connected to the Harrows, Lady Evelyn said, her voice sharp. Malloy opened his mouth to answer, but Poirot cut him off. Nan, monsieur, You will not distract us with half. I have seen the photograph in your satchel, the one of Victor Crane. It is curiously pristine, as if recently printed. And your credentials, while well-crafted, bear a signature that is slightly irregular, as if forged. Tell me, who are you, really, and what is your true purpose here? Malloy's face hardened, and for a moment, it seemed he might bolt, but Poirot's gaze held him in place, unyielding. Finally, Malloy slumped in his chair, his bravado crumbling. All right, you've got me. I'm not Malloy. Name's Eddie Stokes. I'm a fixer, you might say. Hired to scare Crane off. Make sure he doesn't get near the sapphire. But I swear, I'm not here to hurt anyone. Scare him off. Hastings said, incredulous. By pretending to be a private investigator. Who hired you? Stokes hesitated, then sighed. It was Clara Harrow, Lady Evelyn's niece. She said Crane's been sending her threatening letters, demanding money to stay away. She wanted me to pose as an investigator, flush him out, and make him think the law's closing in. Lady Evelyn gasped. Clara, my own niece, why would she not tell me? Perhaps, Madame Poirot said gently, she wished to protect you from scandal. Or perhaps there is more to her motives. Monsieur Stokes, you will remain here under Grayson's supervision while I speak with Mademoiselle Clara. Hastings, fetch her, s'il vous plaît. As Hastings hurried off, Poirot turned back to Stokes, his eyes gleaming. You have been most helpful, monsieur, though not in the way you intended. The sapphire, it seems, is the center of a web, and you are but one of its strands. Within minutes, Hastings returned with Clara Harrow, a young woman with sharp features and a defiant air. Her auburn hair was pinned tightly, and her eyes darted, nervously, between Poirot and Stokes. What's this about, Monsieur Poirot? She asked, her voice edged with defiance. Mademoiselle Clara, Poirot said, his tone deceptively soft. This gentleman claims you hired him to pose as an investigator, to frighten Victor Crane. Is this true? Clara's cheeks flushed, but she held her ground. Yes, it's true. Victor's been blackmailing me, threatening to expose family secrets unless I paid him. I thought if I could scare him off, he'd leave us alone. And you did not think to inform your aunt, or to seek the aid of Hercule Poirot? He asked, his voice carrying a hint of reproach. I didn't want to worry Aunt Evelyn, Clara said, her voice faltering. And I didn't know who to trust. Victor's dangerous, and he's got friends people who'd do anything for money. Poirot studied her for a long moment, his gaze piercing. Very well, mademoiselle, but know this. Deception, even with good intentions, breeds chaos. You will remain in the manor while I verify your story. Monsieur Stokes, you will also stay under guard until I am satisfied of your role. As Grayson escorted Stokes to a guarded room and Clara retreated to her chambers, Poirot turned to Hastings. Mon ami, the plot thickens. This Stokes, he is no mastermind, but a Tula-hired thug, perhaps, sent to muddy the waters. Clara's story, it has the ring of truth, but only partially. There is a larger conspiracy at work, one that centers on the sapphire and the secrets it guards. Hastings nodded, his mind racing. So what's our next move, Poirot? We return to the coded letter, Poirot said, his voice resolute. Its secrets are not yet fully revealed, and we must watch Mademoiselle Clara closely. She is either a victim or a player in this game. Either way, the Harrow sapphire will not remain hidden for long. As they left the drawing room, the morning sun broke through the mist, casting long shadows across the estate. The mystery was far from solved, but Poirot had unraveled one thread. The stranger at the gate was no investigator, but a pawn in a larger scheme. The true danger, he knew, still lurked in the shadows, waiting to strike. Chapter 5. The Lady's Confession. The late afternoon sun cast long, golden fingers through the tall windows of Harrow Manor, bathing the drawing room in a deceptive warmth. Hercule Poirot sat in a high-backed armchair, his small, precise hands folded neatly over his waistcoat, his mustache immaculate as ever. His eyes, sharp as a falcon's, surveyed Lady Evelyn Harrow, who stood by the fireplace, her fingers nervously twisting a lace handkerchief. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and wax polish, but beneath it lingered an undercurrent of unease, as though the very walls held their breath. Madame Poirot began, his voice smooth yet insistent. "You have summoned Hercule Poirot to your splendid home, and yet I sense there is more you have not revealed. The matter of the Harrow sapphire. It is not merely a question of a missing jewel. Nest CEPA. There is a shadow upon this house, and I must know its shape." Lady Evelyn's lips parted, then closed, her eyes darting to the portrait above. The mantel, a stern-faced man with a hawkish nose. Her late husband, Lord Reginald Harrow. She drew a shaky breath, her elegant frame seeming to shrink under the weight of her thoughts. "Monsieur Poirot," she said at last, her voice low, "you are correct. There is more to this matter than I have dared to speak. But to tell you, it is to unearth a grave I thought long sealed." Poirot leaned forward slightly, his head tilted, his expression one of patient encouragement. "The grave of Madame. It does not stay sealed when its secrets stir. Speak, and let Poirot bring light to the darkness." She hesitated, then crossed to a rosewood writing desk, her movements deliberate, as though each step cost her courage. From a drawer, she produced a small, leather-bound journal, its edges worn and yellowed. "This belonged to Reginald," she said, clutching it to her chest. "He was obsessed with the sapphire, not for its beauty, but for what he believed it represented, a legacy, a curse, call it what you will. He spoke of it in riddles, as though it held some power over our family's fate." Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "A curse, you say? And what did Lord Harrow believe this curse to be?" Lady Evelyn's gaze drifted to the window, where the rolling lawns stretched toward the shadowed woods. "He said the sapphire was a key," she whispered. "A key to a truth that could either save or destroy the Harrows. He hid it, Monsieur Poirot, somewhere in this house, in a place only he knew, but he left clues. I've never had the courage to follow until now." Poirot rose, his movements precise, and approached her. "And why, Madame, do you choose this moment to pursue these clues? What has changed?" Her eyes met his, and, for the first time, Poirot saw not just fear, but defiance. "Because someone else is looking for it," she said. "Someone who knows more than they should. I heard the whisper at dinner, as you did, and last night I saw a light in the west winger, part of the manor long closed off. Someone is searching, and I fear what they will do if they find it first." Poirot nodded, his mind already turning like the gears of a fine watch. Then, "Madame, we must act swiftly. You spoke of a place where the sapphire was hidden, a secret passage, perhaps." Lady Evelyn's fingers tightened on the journal. "Yes," she said. "Reginald told me of a passage hidden in the manor's heart. He said it was built by his great-grandfather to protect the family's treasures during troubled times, but he never showed me where it was, only that it could be reached through the old chapel." "Then to the chapel we shall go," Poirot declared, his tone brisk. "But first, Madame, entrust the journal to Poirot. Its pages may hold the key to this mystery." She hesitated, then handed him the journal, her fingers trembling. Poirot tucked it into his coat, his expression one of quiet resolve. "Rest assured, Madame Hercule Poirot shall guard it well. Now, lead the way." The chapel lay at the far end of the manor, a squat, stone structure, half swallowed by ivy, its stained-glass windows dulled by years of neglect. The air inside was cool and musty, the scent of damp stone mingling with the faint sweetness of old incense. Rows of pews, their wood warped by time, stood silent beneath a vaulted ceiling where cobwebs draped like mourning veils. A single candle burned on the altar, its flame flickering, as though stirred by an unseen breath. Poirot's eyes swept the room, noting the uneven flagstones, the faded tapestries, the brass candelabra coated in dust. "A curious place, this chapel," he murmured. "It has the air of a secret waiting to be told." Lady Evelyn pointed to a small door behind the altar, its wood blackened with age. "Reginald said the passage begins there," she said, "but I've never dared to open it." Poirot approached the door, his fingers brushing the rusted iron handle. It creaked open with surprising ease, revealing a narrow stone staircase descending into darkness. He produced a small flashlight from his pocket, its beam cutting through the gloom. "Madame, you will remain here," he said firmly. "Captain Hastings, if you would be so kind as to accompany me." Captain Hastings, who had been lingering near the chapel entrance, looking distinctly uncomfortable among the shadows, straightened. "Of course, Poirot, lead on." The staircase spiraled downward, the air growing colder with each step. The walls were slick with moisture, and the faint drip of water echoed somewhere below. Poirot's flashlight illuminated rough-hewn stone, carved with faint, weathered symbols, runes, perhaps, or mason's marks from a bygone era. At the base of the stairs, they found a low, arched doorway, its frame etched with a Latin inscription: "Cave Fellies, Dormit, Leo. Beware the cat, for the lion sleeps." "Curious," Poirot muttered, his brow furrowing. A warning, perhaps, but for whom? Beyond the doorway lay a narrow passage, its walls lined with alcoves that might once have held relics or treasures. The air was heavy, oppressive, as though the passage resented their intrusion. Poirot moved cautiously, his eyes scanning for any sign of disturbance. At the far end, the passage widened into a small chamber, its floor marked by a mosaic of a lion rampant, its eyes two glittering emeralds. "Mon Dieu," Poirot breathed, crouching to examine the mosaic. "This is no mere decoration. See here, Hastings, the tiles around the lion's head are uneven, as though they have been lifted recently." Hastings peered over his shoulder, his face pale in the flashlight's glow. "You think someone's been here, looking for the sapphire?" "Precisement," Poirot said, his fingers tracing the edge of a tile. With a gentle press, it clicked, and a section of the mosaic slid aside, revealing a shallow recess. Inside lay a velvet pouch, its fabric stained but intact. Poirot opened it, revealing a single object, a silver key, its head shaped like a lion's paw. "No sapphire," Hastings said, disappointment coloring his voice. "But this key, it must lead somewhere, mustn't it?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Indeed, mon ami, this key is a piece of the puzzle, but not the prize. Someone has been here, and recently, for the dust is disturbed, and the pouch shows signs of handling. We are not alone in this hunt." As they retraced their steps, Poirot's mind raced. The key, the passage, the mosaic all pointed to a carefully guarded secret, one that Lady Evelyn's late husband had gone to great lengths to protect. But who else knew of it? And why now, after years of silence, had the hunt for the sapphire resumed? They emerged into the chapel, where Lady Evelyn waited, her face pale but composed. "Did you find it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Poirot held up the key, its silver, catching the candlelight. "Not the sapphire, madame, but a step closer. This key, I believe, will lead us to it. But tell me, have you seen anyone near this chapel in recent days? A servant, perhaps, or a guest?" She shook her head, but her eyes flickered with uncertainty. "No one, Monsieur Poirot. The chapel is rarely used, but last night, I saw that light in the west wing, as I told you. Could it be connected?" Poirot's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "All things are connected, madame. The light, the whisper, the key are threads in the same tapestry, and Poirot shall weave them together." As they left the chapel, the manor seemed to hum with a quiet menace, its corridors stretching into shadow. Poirot's hand rested on the journal in his coat, its weight a reminder of the secrets yet to be uncovered. He was about to suggest returning to the drawing room when a piercing scream shattered the silence, echoing from the guest wing. Hastings froze, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon he did not carry. "Good Lord, Poirot, what was that?" Poirot's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing. "That, mon ami, is the sound of the lion waking. Come, we must hurry." They raced toward the guest wing, their footsteps pounding against the polished floors. The scream had come from the upper corridor, where the guest bedrooms lined a dimly lit hall. A small crowd had already gathered, servants, a few guests, their faces pale with shock. At the center lay a young maid, Ellen, crumpled on the floor, her eyes wide with terror, her hands clutching a torn photograph. Poirot knelt beside her, his voice gentle but firm. "Mademoiselle, you are safe now. Tell Poirot what has happened." Ellen's breath came in ragged gasps. I saw him," she whispered. "In the West Wing, he grabbed me, tore this from my hand. He said if I told anyone, I'd be next." Poirot's gaze fell to the photograph, its edges ragged, one half missing. It showed a man in his 30s, dark-haired with a sharp jaw and a scar above his left brow. "Victor Crane." "And this man," Poirot said, holding up the fragment, "he is known to you?" Ellen nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "It's Mr. Crane, sir, the cousin who was sent away. I saw him last night, near the chapel door. He was looking for something." Poirot's mind whirred, piecing together the fragments. The light in the West Wing, the disturbed mosaic, the Victor Crane was no mere ghost from the family's past. He was here, now, and his presence threatened more than just the sapphire. But why attack the maid? What did she know that he feared? Madame Poirot said, turning to Lady Evelyn, who stood trembling at the edge of the crowd. "This photograph, where did it come from?" "It was Reginald's," she said faintly. "Kept in his study. I didn't know Ellen had it." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Then someone gave it to her, or she found it for a reason. Mademoiselle Ellen, you must rest, but Poirot will speak with you again. For now, Hastings, ensure she is cared for." As Hastings helped Ellen to her feet, Poirot turned to the assembled group, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Mesdames et messieurs, return to your rooms. There is no cause for alarm, but Poirot advises caution. The manor is not as safe as it seems." The crowd dispersed, whispering among themselves, their glances darting nervously. Poirot lingered, his gaze fixed on the torn photograph. The scream, the attack, the keys, they were pieces of a puzzle that grew more intricate by the hour. Victor Crane was close, but he was not alone. Someone in this house was his ally, or perhaps his master. "Poirot," Hastings said quietly, returning to his side, "this is getting dangerous. If Crane's willing to attack a maid, what's to stop him from going after Lady Evelyn or us?" Poirot's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Danger, mon ami, is the crucible in which truth is forged. We have the key, we have the photograph, and we have Poirot's little gray cells. Rest assured, we shall find Mr. Crane, and we shall uncover the heart of this mystery." As they walked back toward the drawing room, the manor seemed to close in around them, its shadows deeper, its silence heavier. The sapphire, the passage, the scream, they were all part of a greater design, one that Poirot was determined to unravel. But for now, the night held its secrets close, and the lion, it seemed, was still watching. Chapter 6. A Midnight Intrigued. The scream tore through the silence of Harrow Manor like a blade through silk, sharp and sudden, shattering the stillness of the late hour. Hercule Poirot, seated in his guest room, was poring over a small notebook, his meticulous handwriting cataloging the day's discoveries, the secret passage, Lady Evelyn's confession, and the cryptic whispers of a cursed sapphire. His pen paused mid-stroke as the cry echoed, its timbre laced with terror rather than surprise. He rose, his movements precise yet swift, his eyes gleaming with the alertness that only a mind honed by years of unraveling human folly could muster. Hastings, who had been dozing in an armchair by the fire, jolted upright. "Good heavens, Poirot! What was that?" Poirot held up a hand, his head tilted, listening for any further sound. "It is not a question of what, mon ami, but of who and why. Come, we must investigate. The night, it seems, is not yet ready to yield its secrets." The corridors of Harrow Manor were a labyrinth of oak-paneled walls and flickering gas lamps, their light casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to dance with secrets of their own. The scream had come from the guest wing, a section of the manor reserved for visitors and lesser family members. Its rooms less opulent, but no less steeped in the estate's heavy air of history. Poirot moved with purpose, his polished shoes silent on the thick rugs, Hastings trailing a step behind, his face a mixture of concern and curiosity. As they rounded a corner, they found a small crowd already gathered near one of the guest rooms. A young maid, her cap askew and her face pale as moonlight, stood trembling, supported by Mrs. Grayson. The stern housekeeper, Lady Evelyn Harrow, her silk robe, hastily tied, hovered nearby, her usual composure frayed at the edges. Two footmen lingered awkwardly, their eyes darting between the maid and the shadowed hallway beyond. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his gaze sweeping the scene. "What has occurred here?" Mrs. Grayson, her voice clipped but steady, spoke first. "It's Elsie, sir, one of the maids. She was found collapsed in her room, clutching something. She's only just come round." Poirot's eyes narrowed as he approached Elsie, who was now seated on a low bench, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her eyes, wide and glassy, darted about as if expecting another unseen blow. In her grip was a torn photograph, its edges crumpled as though she had clung to it for dear life. Poirot knelt before her, his demeanor calm, almost paternal, though his mind was already racing, piecing together the fragments of this new puzzle. "Mademoiselle Elsie," he said softly, his voice a soothing contrast to the tension in the air. "You are safe now. Tell me, what has caused such distress?" Elsie's lips trembled, and for a moment it seemed she might not speak. But Poirot's steady gaze, warm yet unyielding, coaxed her forward. I saw him, sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "In the corridor, near the old portrait gallery. It was him, Victor Crane." A murmur rippled through the small crowd. Lady Evelyn's hand flew to her throat, and Hastings let out a low whistle. Poirot, however, remained impassive, though his mind catalogued the name. Victor Crane, the disgraced cousin, the man tied to the Harrow Sapphire's mystery. A figure who had loomed over the investigation like a specter. "You are certain it was Monsieur Crane?" Poirot asked, his tone measured. "The light, it is dim in these corridors. Perhaps it was another." Elsie shook her head vehemently, her knuckles whitening around the photograph. "No, sir, I'd know him anywhere. He grabbed me, tried to make me keep quiet, said I'd regret it if I told anyone he was here. I tore this from his pocket. As I pulled away, Poirot gently pried the photograph from her hands, smoothing it out with care. It was a faded image, showing a younger Victor Crane standing beside a stern-looking man in a high-collared suit, likely Lord Harrow, Lady Evelyn's late husband. The photograph was torn diagonally, obscuring part of Crane's face, but the resemblance was unmistakable. The sharp jaw, the piercing eyes, the air of defiance. Poirot's lips pursed as he studied it, his mind already weaving connections. "Mercy, Mademoiselle Elsie," he said, rising. "You have been most brave. Rest now, and fear not. Hercule Poirot is here." He turned to Mrs. Grayson. "See that she is cared for, and ensure no one enters her room until I have examined it." Mrs. Grayson nodded curtly, guiding Elsie away as the crowd began to disperse, their whispers trailing like smoke. Lady Evelyn lingered, her eyes searching Poirot's face. "Monsieur Poirot, does this mean Victor is truly here?" "In my home. It would seem so, madame," Poirot replied, his voice calm but firm. "But rest assured, the truth, it will not elude me. Return to your quarters and lock your door. The night is not yet done with its surprises." As Lady Evelyn departed, Hastings leaned in, his voice low. "Poirot, if Crane's skulking about, he's bolder than we thought. What's his game?" Poirot's eyes gleamed in the lamplight. "His game, Hastings, is one of desperation. But whether he seeks the sapphire, revenge, or something else entirely, that we must discover. Come, let us examine Elsie's room." The maid's room was small, tucked at the end of the guest wing, its single window overlooking the dark expanse of the manor's gardens. The air inside was stale, tinged with the faint scent of lavender from a sachet on the dresser. A narrow bed, a wooden chair, and a small table were the only furnishings. Their simplicity a stark contrast to the manor's grandeur. Poirot's gaze swept the room, missing nothing. The rumpled bedspread, the overturned chair, the faint scuff marks on the floor near the door. "Regard us, Hastings," he said, pointing to the scuff marks. "These are fresh, made by boots, not the soft shoes of a maid." Someone entered here, and not with care. Hastings frowned, crouching to inspect the marks. Crane, you think? Perhaps, Poirot said, his fingers brushing the edge of the doorframe. But we must not assume. The mind, it must remain open, like a book yet to be written. He moved to the window, checking the latch. It was secure, but the sill bore faint scratches, as though someone had tried to pry it open from the outside. Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile, not of amusement, but of satisfaction, as if the room were whispering its secrets to him alone. Tell me, Hastings, he said, turning to his friend, what does a man like Victor Crane fear? He is bold, yes, to return to the manor from which he was banished, but to attack a maid, that is not boldness, it is panic. He fears exposure, and that, mon ami, is our advantage. Hastings rubbed his chin, his brow furrowed. So, you think, he's hiding something? Something Elsie saw? Precisely, Poirot said, his voice sharp, and we shall find it. But first, we must ensure Elsie's safety. She is a witness, and witnesses, they are often the target of those who wish to remain in the shadows. They returned to the corridor, where Mrs. Grayson had stationed a footman to guard Elsie's door. Poirot instructed the man to remain vigilant, then led Hastings back toward the main staircase. The manor was quiet now. The earlier commotion settled into an uneasy hush, but Poirot's mind was far from still. He could feel the threads of the mystery tightening, each clue a knot in a tapestry he was determined to unravel. As they reached the portrait gallery, a long hall lined with stern-faced heroes gazing down from gilded frames, Poirot paused before the painting Elsie had mentioned. It depicted Lord Harrow in his prime, standing beside a young Victor Crane, their expressions a study in contrast. The lord stern, the cousins defiant. The painting was slightly askew, as though recently disturbed. Hastings, Poirot said, his voice low, help me with this. Together, they carefully lifted the painting from its hook, revealing a small recess in the wall behind it. Inside was a bundle of letters, yellowed with age, tied with a faded ribbon. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he untied the bundle, scanning the first letter. It was written in a hurried hand, addressed to Victor Crane, and signed by Lord Harrow himself. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, his fingers tracing the ink. This is no ordinary correspondence. Regardless, these letters speak of a debt, a promise made and broken. They suggest Victor was not merely a cousin, but a man with a claim to the Harrow fortune, a claim suppressed by Lord Harrow. Hastings' eyes widened. You mean Victor might be the rightful heir? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Not rightful, perhaps, but entitled in his own mind. This, Hastings, is the fuel for his return. Revenge, not merely for banishment, but for a birthright denied. The letters were cryptic, filled with veiled references to the stone and the vault. Terms Poirot recognized from the coded letter found in the library. He tucked the bundle into his coat, his mind racing. Victor Crane was no mere thief. He was a man driven by a sense of betrayal, and such men were dangerous, not only to those around them, but to themselves. As they replaced the painting, a faint creak sounded from the far end of the gallery. Poirot's hand shot up, silencing Hastings, who had begun to speak. The detective's eyes narrowed, his senses attuned to the slightest shift in the air. Another creak, closer now, followed by the soft thud of a footstep. Stay here, Poirot whispered, moving silently toward the sound. Hastings, ever loyal but less stealthy, followed at a distance, his hand hovering near the revolver he carried, a precaution Poirot had reluctantly allowed. The gallery opened into a small alcove, where a narrow staircase spiraled upward to the manor's upper floors. In the dim light, Poirot caught a glimpse of a figure, a man, tall and lean, his face obscured by the brim of a hat. The figure froze, sensing Poirot's approach, then bolted up the stairs. Apres Louis, Poirot called, his voice sharp but controlled. He ascended the stairs with surprising agility, his short frame belying his determination. Hastings followed, his longer strides closing the gap. The chase led them to a disused attic, its air thick with dust and the scent of aged wood. Trunks and forgotten furniture cluttered the space, casting jagged shadows in the moonlight that streamed through a single, grimy window. The figure had vanished, but Poirot's eyes darted to a pile of crates in the corner, where a faint rustle betrayed movement. "Montrez-vous," Poirot commanded, his voice ringing with authority. "You cannot hide from Hercule Poirot." For a moment, there was silence. Then, with a resigned sigh, the figure emerged, hands raised. It was Victor Crane, his face haggard, his eyes burning with a mix of defiance and fear. His coat was torn, his hair disheveled, but there was no mistaking the man from the photograph. "Monsieur," Crane Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, "you have been most elusive, but the game, it is over. Why have you returned to Harrow Manor?" Crane's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. His gaze flicking toward the attic's shadows as if expecting rescue or an escape. Poirot stepped closer, his presence commanding despite his small stature. "You attacked a maid, monsieur. You skulk in the shadows, seeking what? The sapphire, revenge, or perhaps something more personal?" Poirot's voice was a velvet blade, cutting through Crane's silence. "I didn't attack her," Crane snapped, his voice rough. "I only wanted her to stay quiet. She saw me, and I panicked. I didn't mean for things to go this far." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And yet, here we are. Tell me, monsieur, what is it you fear? The truth, perhaps. The truth of your claim to this estate." Crane's face paled, but before he could respond, a loud crash echoed from below, followed by the sound of running footsteps. Hastings spun toward the door, his revolver drawn. But Poirot's hand on his arm stayed him. "Non, Hastings," he said softly. "This is not the moment for force. Monsieur Crane, you will come with us. The night has revealed much, but there is more yet to uncover." Reluctantly, Crane nodded, his shoulders slumping. Poirot led him down the stairs, Hastings keeping a wary eye on their prisoner. The crash, it turned out, was a fallen vase, knocked over by a nervous footman responding to the commotion. But the incident only heightened the tension in the manor, as if the very walls were conspiring to keep their secrets. By the time they reached the main hall, dawn was beginning to break, its pale light filtering through the manor's tall windows. Poirot handed Crane over to the local constable, who had been summoned earlier, with instructions to hold him for questioning. The detective's face was calm, but his mind was a whirlwind of possibilities. Elsie's attack, the hidden letters, Crane's desperate flight, all were pieces of a puzzle that was far from complete. As the household stirred, whispers of the night's events spreading like wildfire, Poirot retired to his room, the bundle of letters clutched in his hand. He sat at the small desk, spreading them out before him, his fingers tracing the faded ink. Each letter was a thread, each thread a clue, and Hercule Poirot was determined to weave them into a tapestry of truth. "Hastings," he said, as his friend hovered nearby, "the night has been most productive. We have found Monsieur Crane. Yes, but he is not the end of this mystery. He is a pawn, perhaps, in a game far larger than he knows. Tomorrow, we shall seek the hand that moves him." Hastings nodded, his exhaustion tempered by admiration for his friend's relentless mind. "And the sapphire, Poirot, do you think Crane has it?" Poirot's smile was faint, almost wistful. "The sapphire, mon ami, is but a symbol. It is the heart of man that drives this tale of the heart, and its many betrayals. Rest now. The day will bring new challenges, and Hercule Poirot will be ready." As the first rays of sunlight touched the manor's ancient stones, Poirot closed his notebook, his mind already turning to the woods beyond, where he suspected more answers awaited. The mystery of Harrow Manor was far from solved, but with Victor Crane in custody and the letters in his possession, Poirot felt the satisfaction of progressor, step closer to the truth that lay hidden in the shadows of the night. Chapter 7. The Hunt in the Woods. The morning mist clung to the rolling hills of the Harrow estate, weaving through the gnarled oaks and silver birches like a ghostly shroud. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the manor's manicured lawn, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the dew-soaked grass. His gray eyes, sharp as a falcon's, scanned the dense woodland that stretched beyond the estate's formal gardens. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine, and a faint unease rippled through the small group gathered behind him. Captain Hastings, ever loyal but perpetually a step behind Poirot's labyrinthine thoughts, adjusted his tweed cap and muttered, "Dashed queer place to be hiding, don't you think, Poirot? All this wilderness, it's like searching for a needle in a haystack." Poirot's lips twitched into a faint smile, his meticulously trimmed mustache quivering. "Mon ami, a needle in a haystack is only difficult to find if one does not understand the haystack. Victor Crane is no fool, but neither is he invisible. The woods, they speak, Hastings. We must listen." Beside them stood Inspector Japp, his weathered face set in a scowl as he tugged at his overcoat. The local police, summoned at Poirot's insistence, milled about, their boots scuffing the gravel path. Japp, never one for theatrics, grumbled, "This had better be worth it, Poirot. Dragging half the constabulary out here at dawn for a wild goose chase isn't my idea of a good morning." "Patience, my dear Inspector," Poirot replied, his voice smooth as polished oak. "The goose, as you call it, is not so wild. Crane is close-eye, feel it in my little gray cells. And today, we shall flush him from his hiding place." The events of the previous night had set this plan in motion. The scream from the guest wing, the unconscious maid clutching a torn photograph of Victor Crane, had confirmed Poirot's suspicions. Crane, the disgraced cousin of the Harrow family, was not merely a specter of rumor, but a tangible threat lurking near the estate. The maid's halting testimony, extracted with Poirot's gentle precision, had pointed to the woods as Crane's likely refuge. Now, with the sapphire's theft imminent and the manor buzzing with unease, Poirot had orchestrated a discreet search to corner the elusive fugitive. The group moved forward, fanning out into the woods. Poirot, despite his fastidious appearance, navigated the uneven terrain with surprising agility, his walking stick tapping lightly against roots and stones. Hastings, less graceful, stumbled over a protruding root and cursed under his breath, earning a reproving glance from Poirot. "Focus, Hastings, the ground. It is not your enemy. The enemy is the one who hides." The woods were a labyrinth of shadows and sound. Squirrels chattered in the canopy, and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot set nerves on edge. Poirot's plan was meticulous. The police would sweep the western edge, where a stream cut through the forest, while he and Hastings would explore the eastern ridge, where a disused hunting lodge stood. The lodge, Poirot had reasoned, was a logical hideout, sheltered remote, and overlooked by the estate's current occupants. As they approached the ridge, the trees thinned, revealing a clearing dominated by the lodge. Its weathered timbers sagged under the weight of neglect, ivy curling around broken shutters like grasping fingers. Poirot paused, his head tilted as if listening to the wind. "Here, Hastings," he murmured. "This is where the story of Victor Crane begins to unfold." Hastings squinted at the lodge, his hand resting on the revolver tucked into his coat. "You think he's inside? Looks abandoned to me." "Abandoned, perhaps, but not empty," Poirot replied. He gestured to a faint trail of disturbed earth leading to the lodge's door. "Observe, mon ami. The grass is flattened, the mud disturbed. Someone has been here, and recently." They approached cautiously, Poirot's eyes darting over every detail. A cigarette butt half buried in the dirt, a scrap of cloth caught on a thorn bush, a faint boot print in the soft soil. He knelt, examining the print with the precision of a jeweler inspecting a gem. A man's boot, size 10, with a distinctive heel. "This is no poacher, Hastings. This is our man." Inside, the lodge was a study in decay. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light, piercing the cracked windows, and the air was heavy with the musty scent of mold. Poirot moved methodically, his gloved hands brushing over surfaces as he catalogued the scene. A rickety table held a tin of beans, a half-burned candle, and a crumpled map of the estate. Beside it, a worn satchel lay open, spilling papers and a small knife with a carved handle. "Crane has been here," Poirot said, holding up the knife. This blade it matches the description of the one used to threaten the maid. He is bold, but careless. Hastings frowned, peering over Poirot's shoulder. But where is he now? If he's planning to steal the sapphire tonight, he can't be far. Precisement, Poirot agreed. He is close, watching, waiting, but we shall not wait for him to act. We shall set the stage. Poirot's plan was as audacious as it was simple. Use the lodge as bait. He instructed Hastings to fetch Japp and the constables, positioning them in the underbrush surrounding the clearing. Meanwhile, Poirot scattered subtle signs of disturbance. Broken twig here, a displaced stone there, to suggest the lodge had been discovered. Crane is cunning, Poirot explained, but his desperation will draw him back. He cannot afford to abandon his preparations. As the sun climbed higher, the group settled into their ambush. The woods grew still, the only sounds the rustle of leaves and the distant cry of a hawk. Poirot sat on a fallen log, his posture impeccable despite the rustic setting, his eyes fixed on the lodge. Hastings, crouched beside him, fidgeted. How long do we wait, Poirot? What if he doesn't show? He will show, Poirot said with quiet certainty. The sapphire is his obsession. An obsession blinds even the cleverest of men. Hours passed, the tension mounting with each tick of Hastings' pocket watch. Then, as the afternoon light turned golden, a figure emerged from the trees. Tall, lean, with a face shadowed by a low-brimmed hat, the man moved with the cautious grace of a predator. Victor Crane. Hastings gripped his revolver, but Poirot's hand on his arm stayed him. Not yet, Poirot whispered. We must see his intent. Crane approached the lodge, pausing to scan the clearing. His movements were deliberate, his eyes darting to the signs Poirot had left. He cursed softly, drawing a pistol from his coat. Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. He knows we are close. Good. Let him feel the net tightening. But Crane was not alone. A second figure, shorter and stockier, emerged from the opposite side of the clearing, carrying a spade and a sack. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The gardener, Mr. Ellis. I suspected his loyalty was not to Lady Evelyn. The two men conferred in hushed tones, their words inaudible, but their agitation clear. Crane gestured toward the lodge, then pointed to a patch of earth near a gnarled oak. Ellis began to dig, his spade biting into the soil with rhythmic thuds. Poirot leaned forward, his mind racing. They bury something or seek to retrieve it. This is no simple theft, Hastings. There is more at play. Before Poirot could signal Japp, a twig snapped nearby, startling Crane. He spun, pistol raised, and fired into the underbrush. A constable yelped, clutching his arm, and chaos erupted. Japp's men surged forward, shouting, as Crane and Ellis bolted in opposite directions. Hastings leaped to his feet, revolver drawn, but Poirot remained seated, his calm unshaken. After Ellis, Poirot commanded. Crane is the prize, but the gardener knows his plans. Hastings and two constables pursued Ellis, who crashed through the underbrush like a startled deer. Poirot, meanwhile, directed Japp toward Crane, who had vanished into the denser woods. The chase was frenetic, branches snapping and voices echoing. But Poirot's focus remained on the patch of earth Ellis had been digging. He approached it, kneeling to examine the disturbed soil. His gloved fingers sifted through the dirt, uncovering a small metal box. Its surface rusted, but intact. Inside was a bundle of papers, letters, maps, and a photograph of the Harrow sapphire, annotated with dates and locations. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The pieces, they fall into place. By the time Japp returned, red-faced and empty-handed, Hastings had subdued Ellis, who was now handcuffed and sullen. Crane got away, Japp panted, slippery as an eel. That one. But we have his accomplice, Poirot said, holding up the box. And we have this. Mr. Ellis, I think, will tell us much. Under Poirot's relentless questioning, Ellis crumbled. He was no mastermind, merely a hired hand, paid by Crane to sabotage the estate's security, cutting wires, loosening locks, and digging up the box, which contained Crane's plans for the theft. The sapphire, Ellis confessed, was to be stolen. That night, during a distraction at the manor, a staged fire in the stables. Poirot nodded, satisfied. A clever plan, but not clever enough. We have foiled the sabotage, and Crane, he is now a hunted man. He will not escape for long. As the group returned to the manor, the box tucked securely under Poirot's arm, the woods seemed to exhale, their secrets partially revealed. The chapter closed with a sense of triumph. The gardener's arrest and the discovery of Crane's plans marked a significant victory. Yet, as Poirot glanced back at the darkening forest, he knew the hunt was far from over. Crane was still at large, and the sapphire's allure would draw him back. The stage was set for the next act in this intricate drama, and Poirot's little gray cells were already at work, anticipating the final reckoning. Chapter 8. The sapphires cursed. The storm descended upon Harrow Manor with a ferocity that seemed almost personal, as if the heavens themselves were conspiring to trap its inhabitants within the ancient stone walls. Rain lashed against the tall, mullioned windows, and the wind howled through the chimneys, sending eerie moans echoing down the corridors. Hercule Poirot, seated in the drawing room with a cup of tisane, observed the flickering firelight with a calm that belied the tension simmering beneath his meticulously groomed exterior. His little gray cells, as he so often called them, were at work, piecing together the puzzle of the Harrow sapphire jewel that seemed to weave a thread of misfortune through the family's history. The events of the past days had unfolded with the precision of a chess game, each move revealing a new facet of the mystery. The coded letter in the library, the impostor at the gate, the secret passage, and the maid's attack had all pointed to Victor Crane, the disgraced cousin whose motives remained tantalizingly unclear. Yet Poirot sensed that the sapphire's allure extended beyond Crane, entangling others in its web. The storm, trapping everyone within the manor, offered a rare opportunity to observe the players in this intricate drama without the distractions of the outside world. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a sharp rap at the door. Captain Hastings, his loyal friend and occasional confidant, entered, his face flushed from the chill of the unheated corridors. "Poirot, it's getting worse out there," he said, shaking rain from his coat. "The roads are flooded, and the telephone lines are down. We're cut off," Bon Poirot replied, his voice serene. "This isolation, it is most convenient. The players, they cannot flee, and the stage is set for Hercule Poirot to observe. The truth, mon ami, it hides in the shadows of this manor, and tonight we shall coax it into the light." Hastings frowned, running a hand through his damp hair. "You're awfully calm about it. That scream last night, the maid's attack, Crane still at large, it's enough to put anyone on edge. And now this storm. It's as if the manor itself is against us." Poirot's mustache twitched with the hint of a smile. "The manor, it speaks, Hastings. The storm, it is but the backdrop to the drama. And the sapphire is the heart of it all. We must learn its story." The drawing-room door creaked open again, admitting Mr. Godfrey, the elderly groundskeeper, his weathered face lined with unease. His coat was sodden, and his boots left muddy prints on the polished floor. "Begging your pardon, sir," he said, addressing Poirot. "Lady Evelyn sent me to check on you. She's worried about the storm, and, well, there's talk among the staff about the sapphire." Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "Talk, you say? And what does this talk reveal, Monsieur Godfrey?" The groundskeeper hesitated, glancing at Hastings, as if seeking permission to speak. Hastings nodded encouragingly, and Godfrey cleared his throat. "It's the curse, sir. The Harrow sapphire's curse. Been in the family for generations, and it's brought nothing but grief. Betrayals, deaths, madness. It follows that jewel like a shadow." Poirot leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "A curse, you say? Tell me, what is the history of this sapphire? Speak freely, for the truth, it is often hidden in the tales of the old." Godfrey shuffled closer to the fire, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It started with Sir Reginald Harrow, back in 1820. He brought the sapphire back from India, a gift from a Maharaja, or so he claimed, but there were whispers he stole it, tricked the Maharaja out of it during a trade. The jewel was magnificent deep blue, like a piece of the night sky, but it came with a warning. The Maharaja's priest said it was cursed, that it would bring ruin to any who claimed it without right. And Sir Reginald, he did not heed this warning? Poirot asked. Godfrey shook his head. He laughed it off. But within a year, his wife died in childbirth, his eldest son drowned in the lake, and his business ventures failed. He hid the sapphire in the manor, swore it would never see the light of day. But it didn't stay hidden. Every generation, someone's tried to claim it, and every time, disaster follows. Hastings, ever the skeptic, interjected. Surely, this is just superstition, Poirot, a string of coincidences. Jewels don't curse people. Poirot's gaze remained fixed on Godfrey. And you, Monsieur Godfrey, what do you believe? Have you seen this curse at work? The groundskeeper's eyes darkened. I was just a lad when I started working here, under old Lord Harrow, Lady Evelyn's father-in-law. He was obsessed with the sapphire, spent years searching for it. One night, he found a tour, so he thought. Next morning, he was dead. Heart gave out, and his sister, Miss Clara, she went mad after that, ranting about the jewel's curse. She's still here, you know, locked away in the West Wing. Lady Evelyn cares for her, but she's never been right since. Poirot's expression grew thoughtful. Clara Harrow, you say, and she remains in the manor. This is most interesting. Tell me, has the sapphire been seen since? Godfrey nodded reluctantly. Lord Harrow, Lady Evelyn's late husband, he found it again, about 20 years ago. He was planning to sell it, clear the family's debts. But the night he brought it out, there was a fire in the East Wing. He barely escaped, but the sapphire was lost again, or so they say. Poirot's fingers tapped lightly on the arm of his chair, and Victor Crane, the cousin. Did he know of this history? Everyone in the family knows, Godfrey said grimly. Victor's mother was a Harrow. She told him the stories, no doubt. If he's after the sapphire, he's either desperate or foolhardy, or both, Poirot murmured. Mercy, Monsieur Godfrey. You have been most illuminating. Now, I must speak with Lady Evelyn. This curse, it is a story. But stories, they often hide the truth. As Godfrey departed, Hastings turned to Poirot. Do you really believe in this curse nonsense? It's just a way to scare people off. Surely, Poirot rose, adjusting his waistcoat. Belief, mon ami, is not required. What matters is that others believe. The sapphire, it is not merely a jewel, it is a motive. And motive, it leads us to the heart of the crime. Come, we must find Lady Evelyn. The manor's grand staircase creaked under their steps as they ascended to the second floor, where Lady Evelyn's private study awaited. The storm's fury seemed to shake the very walls, and the flickering gas lamps cast long shadows that danced like specters. Poirot's mind was a whirlwind of connections. The sapphire's history, Victor Crane's vendetta, the maid's attack, and now the possibility of a traitor within the household. The groundskeeper's tale had added a new layer to the mystery, one that suggested the sapphire's allure was not merely financial, but deeply personal. Lady Evelyn was seated at her desk, her elegant features strained with worry. The room was warmly lit, with shelves of leather-bound books and a roaring fire, but the atmosphere was heavy with unspoken fears. She rose as Poirot and Hastings entered, her emerald gown catching the firelight. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, I'm so relieved you're here. This storm, it feels like an omen. An omen, perhaps, but also an opportunity, Poirot said, bowing slightly. Madame, I have spoken with Monsieur Godfrey, and he has told me of the sapphire's curse. I must know, do you believe in this curse? Lady Evelyn's lips tightened, and she turned to the window, where rain streamed in rivulets. I don't know what to believe anymore. My husband was consumed by that jewel, and it cost him his peace. I've tried to protect the family, to keep the sapphire hidden, but it seemed to draw trouble like a magnet. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And Victor Crane, did he share your husband's obsession? Victor, Lady Evelyn hesitated, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. He was always bitter, felt cheated out of the family's wealth. When my husband died, Victor claimed he had a right to the sapphire, said it was his mother's legacy. I refused. Him, And he left in a rage. I thought that was the end of it, until now. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Madame, I must ask you to gather the household tonight, in the dining room. The storm, it keeps us all within these walls, and I believe the truth will reveal itself in the presence of all. There is a traitor among us, and I, Hercule Poirot, will unmask them. Lady Evelyn's eyes widened, but she nodded. Very well, Monsieur Poirot. I trust you. 8 o'clock. Then, as they left the study, Hastings whispered, a traitor. Poirot, are you sure about this? It could just be Crane, acting alone. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Alone, perhaps, but supported. Nan, the maid's attack, the impostor, the secret passage all suggests a conspiracy. And the sapphire, it is the key. Tonight, we shall see who trembles in its shadow. The dining room, at 8 o'clock, was a scene of opulent tension. The long mahogany table was set with crystal and silver, but the atmosphere was anything but festive. The storm raged outside, rattling the windows, and the gaslights flickered, casting uneasy shadows. The household gathered, Lady Evelyn, regal, but pale, Clara Harrow, the reclusive aunt, her eyes darting nervously. Thomas, the footman, standing stiffly by the door. The maid, Mary, recovered but shaken, and a handful of other relatives and staff, including the dur-faced housekeeper, Mrs. Finch, and the young cousin, Margaret, who watched Poirot with wide, curious eyes. Poirot stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding despite his diminutive stature. Mesdames, messieurs, he began, his voice cutting through the murmurs. Tonight, we are gathered not to dine, but to uncover a truth. The Harrow sapphire, it is more than a jewel, is a symbol of greed, of betrayal, and, perhaps, of revenge. Someone in this room seeks to claim it, and they will stop at nothing. A gasp rippled through the room, and Clara Harrow clutched her shawl, her voice trembling. It's the curse. I told you, Evelyn, it's the curse. Poirot raised a hand. Non, mademoiselle, a curse is but a story. The true danger lies in human hearts. Victor Crane, he is near, but he does not act alone. There is one among you who aids him, who seeks to profit from the chaos. Mrs. Finch's voice was sharp. This is absurd. You accuse us without evidence, Monsieur. Evidence, madame. I have. Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. The coded letter, the secret passage, the attack on Mariol, point to a plan within these walls. And tonight, I have observed you all. The hands that tremble, the eyes that avoid, they speak louder than words. He turned to Clara, whose face had grown ashen. Mademoiselle Clara, you spoke of the curse. But is it not true that you, too, sought the sapphire? That you believed it was yours by right? Clara's hand shook, and she rose, her voice rising to a wail. I only wanted what was owed. My brother stole it from me, hid it away. I've suffered for it, locked in this house, while Evelyn lives in luxury. Lady Evelyn's face paled. Clara, how could you? Poirot's voice was gentle, but firm. And so, mademoiselle, you allied with Victor Crane. You told him of the secret passage. You helped him plan the theft, hoping to reclaim what you believe is yours. The room fell silent, the only sound, the howling wind. Clara's shoulders slumped, and she sank back into her chair, tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt. Victor promised. He promised it would be simple. Poirot nodded, his expression softening. The heart, it is easily swayed by promises. But you, mademoiselle, you are not the mastermind. There is another, one who manipulates from the shadows. He turned to the table, his gaze sweeping over the faces. The poison, Mies, Amos. It is the final clue. Tonight, a glass of wine was prepared for Lady Evelyn, laced with a subtle toxin. I intercepted it, tested it, and confirmed its nature. The poison, it came from the kitchen, and only one among you had access to the stores. All eyes turned to Mrs. Finch, whose face had gone rigid. She stood, her voice cold. You have no proof, Monsieur Poirot. Nan, the vial in your room, hidden beneath the floorboard. It tells a different story, Poirot said, producing a small glass bottle from his pocket. I found it this afternoon, with the help of Captain Hastings. The same poison, the same motive, to eliminate Lady Evelyn, and clear the way for Victor Crane's claim. Mrs. Finch's composure cracked, and she lunged for the door, but Hastings was faster, blocking her path. "Not so fast, Mrs. Finch," he said, his voice firm. The housekeeper's shoulders sagged, and she turned to Poirot, her eyes blazing. "You think you've won, little man. The sapphire belongs to those who dare to take it. Evelyn's had her time." Poirot shook his head. "None, madame. The sapphire belongs to no one. It is a burden, not a prize. You and Mademoiselle Clara, you were pawns in Victor Crane's game, but the game, it is over." As the local constable, summoned earlier by Poirot, entered to take Mrs. Finch and Clara into custody, the room erupted in murmurs. Lady Evelyn rose, her voice steady despite her pallor. "Monsieur Poirot, I don't know how to thank you. You've saved us from ruin." Poirot bowed. "It is my duty, madame. But the sapphire, it remains. And with it, the danger." As the household dispersed, Poirot lingered by the fire, his mind already turning to the next step. Crane was still at large, and the sapphire's location was unknown. But as he sipped his tisane, a folded note slipped under the dining room door, caught his eye. He retrieved it, unfolding it to reveal a single line in elegant script. "The sapphire is closer than you think." Poirot's mustache twitched. "The game, it continues," he murmured, his eyes alight with determination. Chapter 9. Betrayal at the banquet. The dining hall of Harrow Manor gleamed under the soft glow of 3 chandeliers, their crystal prisms scattering light across the polished mahogany table. The air was thick with the scent of roasted pheasant, glazed figs, and the faint tints of beeswax from the candelabra. Yet, beneath the opulence, a current of unease rippled through the room. The guests, a mix of family, distant relatives, and a few trusted confidants, sat in their assigned places, their faces a gallery of forced smiles and furtive glances. Hercule Poirot, seated near the head of the table, at Lady Evelyn Harrow's insistence, observed them all with the precision of a watchmaker, his keen eyes darting from one to another, cataloging every twitch, every hesitation. The events of the past days, the whispered plot in the drawing room, the footman's confession, the coded letter in the library, and the shadowy figures lurking in the manor's corridors, had brought Poirot to this moment. He was certain the Harrow sapphire, that cursed jewel at the heart of the estate's turmoil, was the key to unraveling the conspiracy. But tonight, he sensed, the danger was not merely theoretical. The air held a sharper edge, as if the very walls of the manor were holding their breath. Lady Evelyn, regal in a gown of deep emerald, raised her glass to propose a toast. "To the Harrow legacy," she said, her voice steady but her eyes betraying a flicker of fear. "May we preserve it, come what may." The clink of crystal echoed, but Poirot's attention was elsewhere. His gaze settled on Clara Harrow, a distant cousin of Lady Evelyn's, seated midway down the table. Clara's fingers trembled as she lifted her glass, her lips parting in a smile that did not reach her eyes. Poirot's mustache twitched. "Mon Dieu," he thought, "she is nervous. But why?" The first course was served a delicate consomme, its steam curling upward like a ghostly cipher. Poirot sipped sparingly, his mind elsewhere. He had learned from the groundskeeper that morning of the sapphire's grim history, a trail of betrayal and bloodshed stretching back generations. The jewel was not merely valuable, it was a lodestone for greed and vengeance. Victor Crane, the disgraced cousin, was still at large, his makeshift camp in the woods a testament to his intent to steal the sapphire. But Poirot suspected Crane was not the sole architect of this plot. Someone within the household, someone, at this very table, was pulling strings. As the servants cleared the soup tureens, Poirot leaned toward Captain Hastings, seated to his right. "Mon ami," he murmured, "observe the guests. The truth, it hides in the small things, the glance that lingers too long, the hand that hesitates." Hastings, ever earnest, nodded. "I've got my eye on that solicitor, Pembroke. He's been awfully quiet tonight. And Clarice keeps looking at Lady Evelyn, like she's sizing her up." "Precisement," Poirot replied, his voice low. "But it is not enough to watch. We must act. Tonight, I suspect, the conspirators will make their move." The main course arrived, pheasant stuffed with chestnuts, accompanied by a rich claret. Poirot noted the wineglasses, their ruby contents catching the light. Lady Evelyn reached for hers, but Poirot's hand shot out, gently intercepting her wrist. "Un moment, milady," he said, his tone polite but firm. "Permit me to examine the glass." The table fell silent, all eyes on Poirot. Lady Evelyn's brow furrowed. "Monsieur Poirot, whatever do you mean?" Poirot lifted the glass to the light, tilting it to inspect the liquid. "A precaution, nothing more," he said, but his heart quickened. There, at the base of the stem, was a faint residue, a powdery film invisible to the untrained eye. He set the glass down and turned to the nearest servant, a young man with a pale face and wide eyes. "You, monsieur, who poured this wine?" The servant stammered. I did, sir, from the decanter, same as the others." "And the decanter?" Poirot pressed. "It was not tampered with?" The servant shook his head vigorously. "No, sir, it was sealed when I fetched it from the cellar." Poirot's eyes narrowed. He gestured for Hastings to fetch a clean glass from the sideboard. Pouring a small amount of wine from the decanter, he compared it to Lady Evelyn's. The difference was subtle, but unmistakable. A slight cloudiness in her glass, a hint of something unnatural. "This wine," Poirot announced, his voice cutting through the murmurs, "has been poisoned." A gasp rippled through the room. Lady Evelyn's hand flew to her throat, and Clara Harrow's glass clattered to the table, spilling claret across the pristine tablecloth. "Poison," Lady Evelyn whispered. "But who? Why?" Poirot stood, his small frame commanding the room. "That, milady, is what I intend to discover. No one is to leave this table until I have answers." The guests exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier decorum fraying. Mr. Pembroke, the solicitor, adjusted his spectacles, his face a mask of calm. "Surely, Monsieur Poirot, this is an overreaction. A mistake in the kitchen, perhaps." "Nan," Poirot said sharply, "this is no mistake. It is deliberate. And I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover the truth." He turned to the servant. "Fetch me the decanter and every bottle from the cellar that supplied this table. VIT, VIT." The servant scurried off, and Poirot addressed the guests. "Mesdames et messieurs, I require your cooperation. Each of you will submit your glass for inspection. If you refuse, I will assume guilt." One by one, the glasses were collected. Poirot examined each under the chandelier's light, his fingers deft and precise. All were clear except Clara Harrow's, which bore the same faint residue as Lady Evelyn's. Clara's face paled, her hands twisting in her lap. "This is absurd," she cried. "I've done nothing wrong." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Then you will not object, mademoiselle, to answering a few questions." He gestured to the butler. "Secure the doors. No one enters or leaves." The atmosphere in the dining hall grew stifling, the weight of suspicion pressing down on the guests. Poirot paced slowly along the table, his voice measured but relentless. "The poison in these glasses is no accident. It is a calculated act, designed to eliminate Lady Evelyn and, perhaps, Mademoiselle Clara. But why? The answer lies with the Harrow sapphire. Someone at this table seeks to control its fate." Clara's eyes darted to the door, then back to Poirot. "You're mistaken, Monsieur Poirot. I have no interest in that wretched jewel." "Perhaps," Poirot said, stopping before her. "But you have an interest in Victor Crane, Nan." The name sent a ripple through the room. Clara's lips parted, but no sound came. Poirot pressed on. "You were seen, mademoiselle, speaking with a man in the garden 2 nights ago, a man whose description matches that of Victor Crane. You deny this." Clara's composure cracked. I was only trying to help him. He's family, after all. He said he was in trouble, that he needed money. And you believed him." Poirot's tone was gentle, but his eyes were steel. "Or did you assist him, knowing his true purpose? To steal the sapphire and destroy the Harrow legacy?" The other guests murmured, their gazes fixed on Clara. Lady Evelyn's voice cut through the din. Clara, is this true? Have you betrayed us? Before Clara could respond, Poirot raised a hand. "Un moment, milady. Let us examine the evidence." He produced a small vial from his pocket, a chemist's tool he always carried for such occasions. Dipping a strip of litmus paper into glass, he watched as it turned a faint blue. "Arsenic," he declared. "A subtle poison, but deadly. And it was placed in your glass, mademoiselle, as well as Lady Evelyn's. Why? To make you appear a victim? Or because you, too, are a threat to the true conspirator?" Clara's hands trembled. "I swear, I didn't know. I only spoke to Victor because he begged me to. He said he'd been wronged, that the sapphire belonged to him." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And yet, you did not tell Lady Evelyn. You did not warn her of his presence. Why?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I was afraid. He threatened me, said he'd ruin me if I spoke." Poirot turned to the other guests. "Mies, Amos, we are close to the truth. But we must dig deeper. The poisoner is among us, and they are cunning. They seek to divert suspicion, to sow chaos. But Poirot does not falter. He moved to the sideboard, where the servant had placed a decanter and bottles. Examining each, he found one bottle with a tampered seal, its contents faintly cloudy. "This," he said, holding it aloft, "is the source. And who had access to the cellar? Who poured the wine?" The servant, trembling, stepped forward. "I swear, sir, I only followed orders. Miss Clarucci told me to use that bottle for her and Lady Evelyn's glasses." Clara gasped. "That's a lie. I never silenced." Poirot's voice was a whip crack. "We will hear your defense, mademoiselle. But first, the facts." He turned to the butler. "Search Miss Clara's room. Look for any vials, anything that might connect her to this act." The butler nodded and departed, leaving the room in tense silence. Poirot paced, his mind racing. Clara's fear seemed genuine, but her connection to Crane was undeniable. Was she a pawn or a player? And what of Pembroke, whose calm demeanor hid a calculating mind? The solicitor had been too quiet, too composed. The butler returned, holding a small glass vial and a folded letter. "Found these under Miss Clara's mattress, sir," he said. Poirot took the vial, sniffing it carefully. The faint, almond-like scent confirmed his suspicions. Arsenic. The letter, written in a hurried scrawl, bore Victor Crane's signature. It instructed Clara to secure the sapphire and eliminate Lady Evelyn, promising her a share of the profits. Clara's face crumpled. "I didn't do it," she sobbed. "I kept the letter to protect myself, but I never agreed to his plan." Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. "Mademoiselle, you have made a grave error. You knew of Crane's plot and did nothing. That is complicity. But I believe you did not act alone." He turned to the table, his gaze sweeping over the guests. "The true poisoner, the one who tampered with the wine, is still among us. And I, Hercule Poirot, will unmask them." He approached Pembroke, who had remained silent throughout the ordeal. "Monsieur Pembroke, you have said little tonight, yet you are the solicitor, the guardian of the Harrow estate. You know its secrets, its wealth. Tell me, what is your role in this?" Pembroke's smile was thin. "I am merely an advisor. Monsieur Poirot, I have no interest in the sapphire." "Perhaps," Poirot said, "but you have an interest in power. In the sapphire, it is a means to that end." He produced a small notebook, flipping to a page of notes. "I have learned, monsieur, that you recently handled a transaction involving the Harrow estate. A transaction that was irregular. A transfer of funds to an account in Victor Crane's name." Pembroke's smile faltered. "Preposterous. You have no proof." "Oh, but I do," Poirot said, holding up a telegram he had received that afternoon from his contact at the bank. "The account was traced to you, monsieur. You funded Crane's scheme, hoping to seize the estate when Lady Evelyn was eliminated." The room erupted in gasps. Lady Evelyn rose, her face pale but resolute. "Mr. Pembroke, is this true?" Pembroke's composure shattered. "You don't understand," he shouted. "The estate was crumbling. I was saving it, ensuring its future. Murder. Poirot's voice was icy. Non, monsieur. You sought to control it for yourself. You used Clara as a scapegoat, planting the vial and letter in her room to divert suspicion. Clara's sobs quieted, her eyes wide with realization. You told me to meet Victor in the garden. You said it was to help him. Pembroke lunged for the door, but Hastings was faster, blocking his path. Not so fast, old chap, he said, gripping Pembroke's arm. Poirot nodded to the butler. Summon the police. Monsieur Pembroke and Mademoiselle Clara will answer for their actions. As the guests murmured in shock, Poirot addressed Lady Evelyn. Milady, the immediate danger is resolved. The poisoner is unmasked, and the sapphire is safe for now. But Victor Crane remains at large, and the true extent of this conspiracy is not yet clear. Lady Evelyn nodded, her face a mask of gratitude and resolve. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. I knew you would see us through. The chapter closed with the police arriving, escorting Clara and Pembroke away. Clara's tearful protests echoed down the hall, while Pembroke's silence was a confession in itself. Poirot stood by the window, gazing into the stormy night. The sapphire was still out there, its allure drawing danger like a moth to a flame. He had thwarted one betrayal, but the game was far from over. Victor Crane, the true puppet master, was still at large, and Poirot's little gray cells hummed with the challenge of what lay ahead. Chapter 10. The Hidden Vault. The morning mist clung to the rolling lawns of Harrow Manor, its tendrils curling around the ancient oaks like ghostly fingers, reluctant to release their grip. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the chapel's weathered stone steps, his polished shoes glinting faintly in the pale light. The air carried the scent of damp earth and moss, and the faint chime of a distant bell punctuated the stillness. His gray eyes, sharp as ever, surveyed the Gothic structure before him, a small, ivy-clad chapel that seemed to whisper secrets of centuries past. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, stood beside him, his breath visible in the chill. Poirot, are you certain this is the place? It's just an old chapel. Looks like it hasn't been touched in years. Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of amusement. Mon ami, appearances. They are the most deceptive of all. The coded letter. It was precise. Beneath the chapel lies the vault, and within it, perhaps, the Harrow sapphire itself. We must proceed with care, for the one who seeks the jewel is cunning, and time, it is not our ally. The coded letter, discovered in the library's hidden compartment, had been a triumph of Poirot's meticulous mind. Its cryptic symbols, a labyrinth of ink and intent, had yielded to his relentless logic, revealing a map that pointed to this very chapel. The vault, it seemed, was no myth, but a tangible reality, hidden beneath sacred stone, guarding the family's most coveted treasure. Yet, the discovery of recent activity in the secret passage, scratches on the walls, a discarded cigarette stub suggested that Victor Crane, the disgraced cousin, or his unseen allies had been here. Perhaps only hours before. Poirot adjusted his hat, his gloved hands moving with deliberate precision. Hastings, we shall require tools. A crowbar, perhaps, and a lantern. The vault, it will not yield its secrets easily. Hastings nodded, his face a mix of skepticism and excitement. Right, I'll fetch them from the groundskeeper's shed. But Poirot, what if Crane's already taken the sapphire? We're chasing shadows if he slipped away. Shadows, mon ami, cast by light, Poirot replied, his voice low and measured. If Crane has the sapphire, he will not escape the net of Hercule Poirot. But I think, perhaps, he has not yet succeeded. The vault, it is a puzzle, and puzzles, they require patience. As Hastings hurried off, Poirot paced the chapel's perimeter, his mind a whirl of deductions. The scream from the guest wing, 2 nights prior, the maid clutching a torn photograph of Crane, the gardener's sabotage in the woods, all threads in a tapestry of deception. Crane was near, that much was certain, but his motives remained elusive. Was it greed for the sapphire's rumored value, or something deeper, a vendetta against the Harrow family? And what of the cryptic note slipped under Poirot's door? Its warning of betrayal within the household. The pieces were many, but the picture, It was not yet complete. Hastings returned, panting slightly, with a crowbar, a lantern, and a coil of rope. "Got everything, Poirot." The groundskeeper wasn't thrilled, but I convinced him it was, for Lady Evelyn's sake. "Now, where do we start?" Poirot gestured to the chapel's heavy oak door. Its iron hinges rusted but sturdy. "We begin where the faithful tread, Hastings." The letter spoke of a sacred heart. In such places, the heart, it is often literal. Inside, the chapel was a study in faded grandeur. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light, piercing the stained glass windows, each depicting saints with solemn faces. The air was heavy with the scent of old wax and polished wood. Poirot's eyes scanned the pews, the altar, the cracked stone floor. At the far end, beneath a window portraying St. Augustine, stood a small statue of the Virgin Mary, her hands clasped over a carved stone heart. "There," Poirot said, pointing, "the Sacred Heart. It is not a metaphor, but a marker." Hastings followed, holding the lantern high as Poirot knelt before the statue. His fingers traced the heart's edges, searching for irregularities. A faint click rewarded his efforts, and a section of the stone floor beside the statue shifted, revealing a narrow spiral staircase descending into darkness. "Good heavens, Poirot," Hastings exclaimed. "You've done it, but it looks frightfully cramped down there." "Courage, Hastings," Poirot said, his tone almost cheerful. The mind of Poirot is accustomed to tight spaces. We descend. The staircase was indeed narrow, its stone steps worn smooth by time. The lantern's light cast eerie shadows, and the air grew colder, thicker, as they descended. At the bottom, they found a low-ceilinged chamber, its walls lined with ancient bricks. In the center stood a heavy iron door, its surface etched with a faint crest the Harrow family's insignia. A lion rampant, clutching a sapphire. Poirot examined the door, his gloved fingers probing for a lock or mechanism. "This is no ordinary vault, Hastings. It is a fortress within a fortress." The letter mentioned a key, but I suspect the key is not of metal, but of knowledge. Hastings frowned, shifting the crowbar in his hands. "Knowledge? You mean another code?" "Perhaps," Poirot murmured. He stepped back, his eyes narrowing as he studied the crest. "The lion, it holds the sapphire in its claws. But observe, Hastings, the sapphire is not carved as the others. It is a depression, a hollow." Hastings leaned closer, the lantern illuminating the faint indentation. "You're right. It's like something fits there. But what?" Poirot reached into his pocket, producing a small, polished stone he had found in the secret passage days earlier. It was sapphire blue, perfectly round, and no larger than a shilling. "This, I believe, is the key." With a gentle press, he fitted the stone into the depression. A low rumble echoed through the chamber, and the iron door creaked open, revealing a small, circular vault. Inside, on a velvet cushion, gleamed the Harrow sapphire gem the size of a quail's egg, its facets catching the lantern's light in a mesmerizing dance of blue fire. Hastings gasped. "Poirot, you've found it. The sapphire. We've beaten Crane to it." Poirot's expression, however, was not one of triumph, but of caution. "The sapphire, yes, but the vault, it has been disturbed. Observe the cushion, its edges are frayed, as if recently moved, and there, in the corner, a smudge of dirt, fresh, not ancient." He knelt, examining the vault's interior. Beside the cushion lay a small, leather-bound ledger, its pages yellowed but intact. Poirot opened it, his eyes scanning the cramped handwriting. "Monsieur," he whispered, "this is no ordinary ledger. It is a will, a forged will, naming Victor Crane as the sole heir to the Harrow estate." Hastings' jaw dropped. "Crane? But he's a cousin, not even in the direct line. How could he—" "Precisely, Hastings," Poirot interrupted. "This will, it is a fabrication, a clever one. The ink, it is modern, and the signature of Lord Harrow. It lacks the flourish of his known hand. Someone has gone to great lengths to rewrite the family's legacy." Poirot tucked the ledger into his coat, his mind racing. The sapphire was secure, a tangible victory. But the forged will opened a new avenue of intrigue. Was Crane the mastermind, or merely a pawn in a larger scheme? The note under his door, the poisoned glass at the banquet, the solicitor Pembroke's evasive demeanor all pointed to a conspiracy that reached beyond the disgraced cousin. "We must return to the manor," Poirot said, securing the sapphire in a velvet pouch. "The jewel, it is safe for now, but the true danger lies above, among those who walk in the light, yet cast shadows of deceit." As they ascended, the chapel's silence felt heavier, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Back in the manor, Poirot summoned Lady Evelyn to the drawing room. The sapphire and ledger, hidden from view, her face, usually composed, betrayed a flicker of unease as Poirot recounted their discovery. "The vault. Lady Evelyn, it has yielded its treasure," he said, his voice calm but piercing. "But it has also revealed a lie, a forged will, designed to steal your family's legacy. Tell me, madame, who among your household might wish such a thing?" Lady Evelyn's hands trembled, but her voice remained steady. "Mr. Poirot, I trust my staff implicitly, save for those you've already exposed. Pembroke, perhaps. He handles our legal affairs, but I cannot believe he would betray us." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Cannot, or will not. The heart, it is loyal, but the mind, it must question. I shall speak with Mr. Pembroke at once." As Lady Evelyn departed, Hastings leaned close. "Poirot, you're not suggesting Pembroke forged the will, are you? He's been with the family for years." "Years, Hastings, do not guarantee loyalty," Poirot replied. "They merely provide time to nurture ambition. Come, we must prepare. The net, it tightens, but the fish, it is cunning." The rest of the day passed in a flurry of discreet inquiries. Poirot interviewed Pembroke, whose nervous fidgeting and vague answers only deepened suspicion. He examined the manor's records, cross-referencing signatures and dates, confirming the will's forgery. By evening, as the household gathered for dinner, Poirot felt the weight of the mystery pressing closer to its resolution. At the table, he raised a glass, his voice cutting through the chatter. "Mies, Amos, tonight we dine not only on fine food, but on truth. The Harrow sapphire is safe, but a greater treasure, the truth of this house, remains at risk. Tomorrow, I shall reveal the one who seeks to rewrite your legacy." The guests exchanged uneasy glances, and Poirot noted each reaction: Pembroke's sudden pallor, Clara Harrow's clenched jaw, the footman Thomas's averted eyes. The stage was set, the sapphire secured, but the final act loomed, a confrontation that would unmask the true architect of the conspiracy. As the chapter closed, Poirot retired to his room, the sapphire and ledger locked in a small safe. He sat by the window, the moon casting a silver glow over the estate. The vault had been breached, the jewel reclaimed, but the forged will pointed to a deeper betrayal. Tomorrow, he would lure Victor Crane into the open, but tonight, his little gray cells worked tirelessly, weaving the threads of evidence into a tapestry of justice. Chapter 11. The Confrontation. The air in Harrow Manor was thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth and the faint musk of old stone, as if the house itself were holding its breath. Hercule Poirot stood in the conservatory, a glass-domed sanctuary, where moonlight filtered through tangled vines, casting dappled shadows on the tiled floor. The hour was late, the manor's guests long retired to their rooms, but Poirot's mind was a whirl of precision, his little gray cells aligning the threads of a mystery that had grown ever more intricate. The Harrow sapphire, a jewel of legend, had been found in a hidden vault beneath the chapel, only to reveal a deeper conspiracy. Victor Crane, the disgraced cousin of Lady Evelyn Harrow, was the key, and tonight, Poirot had set a trap to ensnare him. The conservatory was an unlikely stage for a confrontation, yet Poirot had chosen it deliberately. Its glass walls offered visibility, its exits were limited, and its isolation from the main house ensured privacy. He had spread a rumor through the servants carefully, subtly, that the sapphire was being moved to a secure location in the village bank at midnight. The bait was irresistible, and Poirot, with his meticulous understanding of human greed, knew Crane would bite Captain Hastings, ever loyal but perpetually baffled, stood by the door, his revolver discreetly tucked beneath his jacket. "I say, Poirot," he whispered, his voice tinged with unease. "Are you sure about this? Crane's a slippery fellow. What if he brings trouble?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Mon ami, trouble is, precisely, what I expect. But fear not, Hercule Poirot has prepared for all contingencies. The little gray cells, they do not fail." Hastings frowned, glancing at the shadows beyond the glass. "Still, I'd feel better if we had more men. The local constable's a good sort, but he's hardly a match for a desperate criminal." "Patience, Hastings," Poirot replied, his tone calm but firm. "It is not numbers that win the day, but strategy. Now, observe, and be ready." The conservatory was a labyrinth of exotic plant ferns, with fronds like green lace, orchids that glowed faintly in the moonlight, and a towering palm that loomed like a silent sentinel. Poirot had positioned himself near a wrought iron bench, a vantage point that allowed him to survey the room. A small table beside him held a decanter of brandy and 2 glasses, an innocuous prop to lull Crane into a false sense of ease. The trap was simple but elegant. The rumor of the sapphire's movement, whispered to the maid who had proven susceptible to gossip, would draw Crane to the conservatory, where Poirot waited. The clock in the hall chimed 11, its notes echoing faintly through the manor. Poirot's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the darkness beyond the glass. A rustle of leaves, a faint creak of a floorboard. His senses were attuned to every anomaly. Then, a shadow moved at the far end of the conservatory, near the door leading to the garden. A figure emerged, tall and lean, moving with the cautious grace of a predator. Victor Crane. Crane was a man of striking contrasts. His tailored coat spoke of wealth, but its frayed cuffs hinted at desperation. His face, illuminated by a shaft of moonlight, was angular, with eyes that glinted like polished obsidian. He paused, scanning the room, his hand hovering near his pocket. Poirot noted the bulger weapon, no doubt, but remained unperturbed. "Monsieur Crane," Poirot called, his voice smooth and inviting. "You are late, but not unwelcome. Will you join me for a brandy?" Crane froze, his eyes narrowing. "Poirot," he said, his voice low and edged with menace, "I should have known you'd be meddling. What's this about?" Poirot gestured to the table, his movements deliberate. "A simple conversation, monsieur. You have come for the sapphire. But I propose we discuss it like gentlemen." Crane's laugh was a harsh bark. "Gentlemen, you think I'm here for pleasantries. I know the sapphire's being moved tonight. Where is it?" Poirot poured brandy into both glasses, the amber liquid catching the light. "The sapphire is safe, for now. But you, Monsieur Crane, you are not. You have returned to Harrow Manor, after years of exile, driven by a hunger for what is not yours. Tell me, why risk so much?" Crane stepped closer, his hand still near his pocket. "You don't understand, Poirot. The sapphire belongs to me. It was promised to me by my uncle before Evelyn's scheming drove me out. I've waited long enough." Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "Promised, you say? A curious claim. And yet, Lady Evelyn speaks of you as a traitor to the family. Perhaps you will enlighten me." Crane's jaw tightened, but he took another step forward, drawn by Poirot's calm demeanor. "Evelyn's a liar. She and her husband wanted the sapphire for themselves. They spread lies, turned the family against me. I was young, foolish, but I never betrayed them." Poirot sipped his brandy, his expression inscrutable. "And yet, here you are, skulking in the shadows, plotting to steal what you claim is yours. A strange way to prove your innocence, Nan." Crane's hand twitched toward his pocket, but Poirot raised a finger, his voice sharp. "I would not do that, Monsieur Crane. My friend Captain Hastings is an excellent shot, and he is watching." From the shadows, Hastings stepped forward, his revolver glinting faintly. Crane's eyes darted between them, calculating. "You're bluffing," he said, but his voice wavered. "Bluffing is not the method of Hercule Poirot," the detective replied. "Now, sit. Let us speak of the sapphire, and of the man who sent you here." Crane hesitated, then sank onto the bench, his posture tense. "What man? I'm here on my own." Poirot's smile was thin. Come, Monsieur Crane. You are clever, but not so clever as to orchestrate this alone. The whispers in the village, the attack on the maid, the tampering with the vault, these are not the work of one man. You are a pawn, are you not?" Crane's face darkened, and for a moment, Poirot thought he might lunge, but then, with a bitter laugh, Crane leaned back. "You're good, Poirot, too good. But I'm not saying another word until I see the sapphire." Poirot set down his glass, his movements deliberate. "Very well. You wish to see the sapphire. Then you shall." He reached into his coat pocket and produced a small velvet pouch. From it, he drew a jewel that caught the moonlight in a blaze of blue fire. The Harrow sapphire, larger than a quail's egg, shimmered with an almost supernatural allure. Crane's breath caught, his eyes fixed on the jewel. It's real," he whispered. "After all these years, it is real," Poirot said, "and it is the key to your undoing. You see, Monsieur Crane, I have deduced much. The sapphire was never your goal, was it? You were sent to retrieve it, to deliver it to another. But who?" Crane's composure cracked, his voice rising. "You don't know what you're dealing with, Poirot. This goes deeper than you can imagine. If I don't get that sapphire, I'm a dead man." "Then tell me," Poirot pressed, his tone unrelenting. "Who threatens you? Who pulls the strings?" Before Crane could respond, a sharp crack echoed through the conservatory. A pane of glass shattered, and a bullet whizzed past Poirot's head, embedding itself in the palm trunk behind him. Hastings shouted, diving for cover, while Crane scrambled to his feet, his eyes wild. "Get down!" Hastings yelled, but Poirot remained calm, slipping the sapphire back into his pocket, and, crouching behind the bench, another shot rang out, shattering a pot of orchids. The conservatory was a chaos of shadows and glass, the moonlight now a liability. "Stay where you are, Crane," Poirot commanded, his voice cutting through the panic. "You are safer with me than with your unseen master." Crane hesitated, torn between flight and surrender. Then, with a curse, he bolted for the garden door. Hastings fired a warning shot, but Crane was already through, vanishing into the night. After him, Hastings shouted, but Poirot held up a hand. "No, mon ami," he said, rising and brushing dust from his coat. "Let him go. He will lead us to the true culprit." Hastings gaped. "You're letting him escape?" After all this, Poirot's eyes gleamed with certainty. "Escape, Nan Hastings. He is running into the net I have woven. Come, we must alert the constable and prepare for what comes next." As they hurried from the conservatory, the manor's silence was shattered by the distant wail of a siren. Poirot's trap had not gone entirely as planned, but it had yielded results. Crane was on the run, and his fear had revealed the truth. He was not the mastermind, but a pawn in a larger game. The shots fired in the conservatory were a desperate act, and Poirot knew they pointed to a figure still hidden in the shadows. In the manor's hall, Poirot found Lady Evelyn, pale and trembling, roused by the gunfire. "Monsieur Poirot," she cried, "what has happened?" "A small disturbance," Madame Poirot said, his tone reassuring. "But fear not. The little gray cells, they are closing in on the truth. By morning, we shall have our answers." As the constable arrived, Poirot outlined his plan. A discreet cordon around the estate, with Crane's likely hiding places, the woods, the village and underwatch. The sapphire, now safely locked in the manor's safe, was no longer the prize, but the bait. Poirot's mind was already turning to the next phase. The unmasking of the puppeteer who had sent Crane into the fray. The night ended with Poirot in his room, his notebook open, sketching a web of connections. Crane, the sapphire, the vault, the whispers, and now, the unseen shooter. The confrontation had been a victory, but an incomplete one. Crane's capture was imminent, but the true mystery, the identity of the mastermind remained. Poirot closed his notebook, his mustache twitching with satisfaction. The game was far from over. But Hercule Poirot was in his element, and the truth, he knew, was within his grasp.